All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the regular city council meeting of April 2nd, 2024. We could have a roll call, please. Anita?
Councilmember McCarthy,
Here.
Councilmember Biala,
Here.
Councilmember McAdams,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vischer,
Here.
Mayor Delgado.
Here. Okay, we don't have any closed session, so we'll go to a moment of silence. So please stand for a moment of silence, and then Councilmember Vischer is going to lead us in the pledge. Okay, at this time, we'll hear council and staff announcements. Anyone? Councilmember McAdams?
Thank you, Mayor. There's a special meeting for the Recreation and Cultural Services Commission being held tomorrow, Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. In the council chambers, and the agenda is posted online. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Come on up, Andrea. Andrea is our Director of Cultural Resources and Recreation Department.
Thank you. Just a couple quick announcements about some of our programs. So we have a youth track and field program that started today, but we still have space available. So if anyone from the public wants to sign their child up, they can do that. Coming up starting April 15th is our futsal league. So that is also available. And Friday, we will be launching our software for all of our summer camp programs. We tested it today, and you might have heard the celebration all the way down the hill because we were so ecstatic when our first credit card transaction actually went through. And so all of our summer activities will be available online starting on Friday. Super easy to create an account and do your transaction. And so I just want to request that anyone who thinks they want to sign up for something, go ahead and create the account now. That way, when it opens, you're ready to go and you just have to do the transaction. And then lastly, we have our Bike Fest on Saturday, April 13th from 11 to 3 p.m. at the Marina pump track. And we have a few professional riders that will be there to do demonstrations and some skills clinics. We have lots of vendors, all bike related. Food vendors. We're gonna have a DJ. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So go to the Earth Day in the morning and then head on over to the pump track in the afternoon. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. Anyone else? Okay. So let's move on then to public comment. Anything that's not on tonight's agenda that's on your mind? We'll start with people in present here. Anyone wishing to come up to the podium to speak on public comment? Seeing no one rising, we'll go online. Anybody online, just raise your hand. Okay, no one wishing online, so we'll close public comment and go to our consent agenda. Does any member of the council have any questions, brief comments on the consent? Councilmember McCarthy?
Thank you, Mayor. Hopefully a brief question about 10I1 10L1, the objective zoning standards. I know we said with the question about the windows, we were going to come back to council, but I'm wondering if we can put some kind of timeline on that. I just really worry that sometimes things lapse and go on for a long time and we don't end up bringing them back. Obviously, I spoke very passionately at our last meeting. It was important to me. Is 60, 90 days reasonable? Or?
To the mayor. It is a priority of staff. Allison and the consultant are researching it, so it's not going to be lost in the shuffle. We're aware of it. It's a priority.
Can we put a timeline
Sure,
on it?
that's fine.
So what does very near future? What's in a reasonable time?
60 days?
Or 90, yeah. 60 days would be great. So
That's fine.
that was my only question. So we can just include that in any motion to approve that item.
All right. Any other questions, comments, wishes to pull anything? Can we have Councilmember McCarthy, why don't you motion to,
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve the consent agenda with the addition that under item 10, L1, the objective zoning standards, that the item on windows will be brought back within 60 days.
Happy to second that.
all right, any final comments before we go to a vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion passed unanimously. Thank you, Councilmember McCarthy. And now we go on to our public hearing regarding coastal development permit for a 5,000 gallon water storage tank, et cetera.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council and public. My name's Allison Hunter. I'm the Planning Services Manager and the project planner for this project before you on appeal. So this is an appeal of Coastal Development Permit 23-0004 for the property located at 3014 Lake Court. Okay, just a brief history of this property. As noted in your staff report, the county assessor's office recognizes this property as having a single family residence on it since the 1930s. In 1982, the city of Marina adopted its local coastal program, first local coastal program. And in that, this property, the house on this property, and the other two houses on Lake Court were all recognized in numerous sections of the LCP as existing at that time. In 2007, a report was prepared by the Marina Coast Water District indicating that the subject property, 3014 Lake, had previously been served through a subconnection to water, to public water, through the neighbor and who happens to be the appellant in this case, their service at 3010 Lake Court, but it had been disconnected in the early 2000s. In 2012, the property was purchased by the applicant's parents and then transferred to Mr. Perrine in 2020. And he has not been able to permanently reside in the property because of this water supply issue. So just a note, since Mr. Perrine has owned the property and actually previously, there have been attempts to improve the property with just minor repairs and fix-its that can occur without building permits of one kind or another. So it's important to note that you are allowed to do minor maintenance and repair without necessarily building permits or a coastal development permit. So that's just a note to keep in the back of your head. So then in February of this year, Mr. Perrine had submitted an application for a coastal development permit and a conditional use permit with all of the requisite materials in the application for us to take it forward to the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission approved the conditional use permit, which legitimized the existing residential use. And then also the coastal development permit for the development of a new garage and a potable water storage tank and ancillary pump system to that storage tank. All of these properties are zoned public facility. They are all in the coastal zone. They have a general plan designation of open space. So they're, this is a very unique neighborhood in Marina. It's small. It has a mix of uses. And so we had to handle it as a very, on a very individual kind of case by case basis for this particular project. So the Planning Commission approved the CDP and the CUP on February 8th. And then on February 20th, Miss Tina Walsh, the neighbor owner of 3010 Lake Court, did file a timely appeal just of the coastal development permit, meaning that the conditional use permit or CUP remains in effect. That was not appealed, so it's functional today. Okay. So the basis of the appeal, and this is included as a exhibit in your staff report, the appellant brings up these three specific issues. The first is the reestablishment of this use is future development and therefore needs to be connected to public water. Staff's response is the existing residences on Lake Court are specifically recognized several times in the certified local coastal program, so cannot be considered new or future. Water requirements are met by providing on-site water storage tank. So the LCP specifically separates the requirement for new or future development to be connected to public water. It does not say that existing development, like an existing residence that needs to be served by water, must be connected to public water. It simply says you shall have a water source. So the second issue brought up in the appeal is that there is no finding that the private sewage disposal system is constructed in conformance with Monterey County Health Department standards. So staff response to that is the findings made by the Planning Commission are those that are codified in our Marina Municipal Code for coastal development permits. So the typically entitlements and development permits in their findings have a public health and safety finding that must be met. For whatever reason, our current zoning code for coastal standards does not have that specific finding, but that finding was made by the Planning Commission as part of the conditional use permit. It is a standard finding for the use permit. So that was a big topic of discussion for the Planning Commission, and the commission did add specifically a condition of approval requiring that the existing on-site sewage disposal system be tested by a qualified contractor and that it is shown to be operational and safely operated. That's condition number 8, I believe, in the conditions of approval. The third item is that the site plan fails to indicate parking areas and a circulation and loading area for deliveries of water. So the staff response to that is a delivery truck will be able to service the tank from the public right-of-way. Lake Court is a public street. It's a 30-foot wide paved street with a full cul-de-sac at the end. I researched water delivery and conveyance systems and trucks and what they can do. And licensed water delivery companies use hoses up to 1,000 feet in length. And the water tank, as proposed, is located about 120 feet from the front of the property line. So there shouldn't be an issue reaching the tank from the street. So a couple of questions for the council to consider is, although not within the scope of this proceeding exactly, could the issuance of this coastal development permit result in the proliferation of water tanks throughout the city? Our research indicates that water tanks are allowed in all zoning districts, coastal and non-coastal. So they would have to be addressed kind of on a case-by-case basis. However, there is an option that the council could consider as a separate item, not directly related to this project, but the council could undertake an amendment to the zoning code that does put more development standards on this code section, allowing water tanks. So for example, you cannot install a potable water tank if you are within so many feet from an existing public water main or a sewer main for on-site sewage disposal. So there are ways other jurisdictions do have these standards codified. So that's something that the council could consider separately, moving on from this particular project. Another item that came up in discussions was, can there be a time limit added to the lifespan of the tank? There are a couple of responses to this. You could add a condition of approval that requires the property owner to connect to public water in a certain situation, like say Marina Coast Water District does extend the water main down to the end of Lake Court. Then there could be a condition on the CDP that requires connection to that. Or could there be a time limit requiring renewal of the CDP within an established time frame? And our code does allow for that. I would encourage that a verifiable on-site condition should be included in a condition of approval like that. So there should be something that the time frame is measured against. Like if you have a certain time frame, there should be some kind of quantifiable, measurable scenario happening that you can say, yes, this amount of time passed and these conditions exist on the site. So therefore a renewal is required or something along those lines. So options for the council. The first option and staff's recommendation is uphold the Planning Commission's approval and deny the appeal. This is based on conditions of approval, findings, and Class 1 and Class 3 CEQA exemptions. Under this scenario, the council could add additional conditions of approval or modify or delete the conditions of approval that are already provided. Or your other option is to uphold the appeal, overturning the Planning Commission's approval without prejudice and include findings for denial. Findings for denial could include deciding that water requirements outlined in the LCP are not met with the storage tank as proposed. Just a note for your deliberations, our code in Title 17 does state that the City Council shall render its opinion on the matter of an appeal within 60 days of receipt of the appeal. So that gives us April 16th as the drop dead date. That is codified. And then what happens next if the City Council, regardless of the action or the outcome of tonight's meeting, either the appellant could appeal further to the Coastal Commission, or the applicant could appeal to the Coastal Commission, or the Coastal Commission itself could appeal to the Coastal Commission. One thing that's a little bit different in appeals to the Coastal Commission is there are actually findings of substantial issue that this Coastal Commission has to make in order to take up an appeal. And so in summary, the requested water tank is intended to serve the existing residents. So no expansion of the existing residence is requested at this time. The project does include a new detached garage, which is ancillary and incidental to the existing residential use. The existing residence does not constitute new or future development and is identified specifically in several locations or several sections of the LCP. So again, staff recommends for these reasons that the council uphold the PC's Planning Commission's approval and deny the appeal. I just want to point out that this afternoon you all received additional correspondence from the appellant. So I want to make sure you have that. And then the applicant, Mr. Perrine, is here. I don't see the appellant in the audience, so I'm not sure if the appellant is here, but that concludes my staff report. I'm available for any questions.
Okay, Um, let's move to any ex parte disclosures. Anyone want to report something, any communication they've had with the public or otherwise on this matter? Councilmember McCarthy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I became aware of this issue several years ago, have spoken to Mr. Perrine, a couple times. I think first before I was on council, I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think right around that time I was elected. He did provide me, a few emails that went back and forth between him and city staff, but nothing that's not already on the record. Really nothing that wasn't already just covered by staff, that he shared with me. And then the appellant, Tina Walsh, I know through, she's very active in the community. I don't recall ever specifically talking about this issue, maybe in passing, just, oh yeah, there's this issue about water down on Lake Court. So that's my ex parte. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Also.
Okay. All right. I've spoken to Jeff Perrine about this on a few occasions over the years. Lots of email correspondence as well. Spoken to his mom at least once, I can recall recently. And I've spoken to the appellant Tina Walsh a few times over the years. And when this came out on an agenda that didn't include the address, I called Tina and said, Tina, is this on your street? And are you involved? She said, yeah, I'm the appellant. And she basically told me her perspective, which is primarily in her mailer today. So that's for me. Anybody else? No. Okay. All right. So I
Through
think
the
it-
mayor, sorry to interrupt, but I do just want to point out that Ms. Walsh is online, so the appellant is
yeah,
here.
it looks like she has her hand up to speak. So at this time, we'll open the public hearing and start with anyone in this room that would like to speak. Please step up to the podium. Yeah.
I could just kind of summarize the sort of proceedings how these are typically handled. So we've gone through the mayor introducing the item and city staff's report. I think what happens next is the applicant gets the opportunity to present their view of the case, and then it would be the appellant. Each of them gets up to 10 minutes according to our rules, and then you'd have public comment after
All right.
that.
All right. So we'll back up a step and invite the applicant to present for up to 10 minutes. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Well, greetings, Honorable Mayor and council members. I am Jeff Perrine. I'm the owner of 3014 Lake Court. I want to begin this evening by thanking the council for your time and for your resolve to improve the standard of living for all Marina residents. I understand and have witnessed firsthand the effort it takes to be an effective member of council, and I commend you for your dedication to our city. I'd also like to take this time to thank the city staff, in particular, Planning Manager Allison Hunter, for her work on this matter. Her thoroughness and professionalism should be recognized and commended. A little background on myself. Grew up here in Marina, and over the 40+ years of growing up here, I've long dreamed of owning my own home here in Marina, raising my children here in town, and one day, God willing, retiring here in town. I'm the proud father of 2 sons, Jacob, right here. My eldest is 26, and his younger brother, Isaac, is 13. Together, the 3 of us have attended pretty much every school here in Marina: Olson, Crumpton, Los Alamos, and Marina High. I've been an active member of community and volunteered my time with various organizations like Marina Soccer, Marina Baseball, the Knights of Columbus, and the American Legion. For a number of years, I helped to manage the Sanctuary Beach Resort. I actually opened that property when it was the Marina Dunes Resort. Some of you have come to use our pool many times. And as in the management of Sanctuary Beach Resort, I'm happy to be able to say that We helped to promote many city events. We supported a lot of local businesses, supported the Chamber of Commerce, which would hold a lot of their meetings there, and supported many city departments such as the police department as they would hold a lot of their interviews there. Currently, I work for Monterey Peninsula Unified School District, where I'm able to continue my service to the community. Each and every one of us here tonight is aware that housing is a major challenge for families like mine on the Central Coast. Homelessness and the ever rising cost of living is a serious concern that every city is faced with, and is also a concern that MPUSD is struggling to address, both for the families that live here and the staff. On this note, I'd like to commend the City Council for officially joining the Lead Me Home Plan. And for those of you in attendance tonight who are unfamiliar with the Lead Me Home Plan, the Lead Me Home Plan is a comprehensive initiative led by the Coalition of Homeless Service Providers, and which aims to tackle the growing crisis of homelessness on the Central Coast. The goal being to reduce homelessness by 50% over the next 5 years. Tonight, we have a wonderful opportunity to tackle this specific issue. And you have the opportunity to show your resolve in helping to address the current housing crisis. While this will not fix the entire housing crisis that the city faces, it will be huge for my family, for me and my family. While moving into our home may only contribute on a small scale toward achieving the city goal, the city, county, and state goals of affordable housing and urban infill, it will be a gigantic life-changing step forward for me and my family. As a longtime resident of over 40 years, a single parent, minority family, active volunteer, low-income MPUSD employee, I am seeking your support this evening so that my son and I can finally make our dream a reality and live in our home. I concur with the staff report recommendations, and I agree with the thoroughness of the report. The staff summarizes everything very well, and I'm prepared to continue to work with the city to finish and finally get moved into my home. As you deliberate, I'd like you guys to keep the following points in mind. Marina Coast Water District has not objected to the water tank. It was actually one of their suggestions. Lake Court is actually named as an anomaly within the city of Marina, with no access to Marina Coast Water District water or sewer. The county has no jurisdiction or any permit requirements for the water tank system. This decision lies in this room alone. The existing septic tank has passed inspection. I am prepared, however, to do another inspection to please the conditions. The water tank system is a temporary solution to enable my family to begin living in our home. I will gladly connect to Marina Coast Water District, water and sewer, once these utilities are extended through Lake Court. I'd happily do that. Property would be worth more. The installation of a private water line from my house to where the water main currently ends, which is about 2,000 feet, is not only unaffordable, it presents legal issues if there were to be a break or damage in the line. The cost of installing this line will be in excess of over $100,000. And if there was an issue with a break in that line, that brings up the legalities of whose responsibility it would be to fix that. I am following the process and direction of city staff to bring my property up to code, to make it habitable, safe, and beautify the neighborhood. Something that the council and the planning commission has been discussing, maybe since last year, maybe longer, is the image of the city and what we need to do to enhance the image of the city. If any of you are familiar with Lake Court, and if any of you have walked down Lake Court, you'll see there's much room for improvement. Lake Court is the access point of one of only 2 beach accesses this city has. Yet, I challenge you to find another beach access in this county that's in that much disrepair. The majority of the property on Lake Court is city-owned and very in poor condition. My property, what I'm trying to do is enhance the neighborhood, beautify the neighborhood. And I hope I have your support this evening to be able to move forward with that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeff. Okay. So Jeff, we might call you back if we have questions later. So our process, next step is for the appellant, Ms. Walsh, to speak. Tina, we're going to turn this over to you in just a second. And Tina, you have up to 10 minutes.
Wow, 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Mayor and City Council. I also appreciate the time that you're taking to consider this issue. I did send out a letter. I'm going to pretty much read the same thing for you just to get it into the record. I disagree with the staff recommendation that necessary water requirements to legitimize residential use of this property can be adequately met by utilizing hauled water stored on site in a storage tank. The proposed water storage tank is not incidental to the residential use, but is in fact the water being relied upon for the residential use. The Marina Code zoning section 1740-120B12 cited to justify the water tank allows for water facilities, which are storage systems, and storage tanks should not be confused with reliable water sources. Hauled water has to come from somewhere else. Perhaps the proposed garage water tank and pump are simply structures that do not require a water source, but reestablishing residential use on a property relying on a septic system certainly does require a reliable water source. Marina Code 130610 adopts Marina County Ordinance number 1836 by reference in matters relating to health and sanitation, sewers, septic tanks, etc. In the discussion of finding A, it is stated that the intent of the proposed water storage tank is to provide a permanent residential water source for the property. However, operational requirements found in Monterey County Code 1504-085C state that domestic water systems shall provide a permanent, reliable, continuous, and adequate supply of pure, wholesome, and potable water. Ordinance 4056-2000. Again, a storage tank by itself is not a source of water. I phoned the Monterey County Environmental Health Department this morning and was told that hauled water stored in an on-site storage tank could be utilized as a temporary solution while work was being done, but would not meet the standards in Chapter 15 of the county code to qualify as a permanent domestic water source. The condition of approval number 7 appears to remove any typical water and sewer clearance requirements from this application by asking our named local agency, the Marina Coast Water District and the Monterey County Environmental Health Department, only to verify that their agencies do not require permits for an above ground water storage tank. This does not address the actual domestic water source issue. And to not address the domestic water source issue is to essentially normalize an off-grid use of the property that lies within the city boundaries of Marina. Why take such extreme measures? I must also question a new reference in tonight's staff report that 3014 is served by a PG&E gas line, which does not appear in the February 8th Planning Commission staff report. In the past, I have personally asked PG&E surface personnel visiting my residence that very question and have been told that 3014 does not appear on their service maps. So while it is true that a single-family residence isn't allowed use on the private land east of Lake Court in the local coastal plan, it is equally true that the primary use envisioned for these properties was for all to be eventually publicly acquired for public works purposes. I feel the city council needs to ask for better information regarding the actual service capabilities of 3014 before it can make a truly informed decision about allowing potential residential use of the property. Thank you. Tina Welch.
Thank you, Tina. Anything else that you'd like to comment on?
No, I don't think so.
All right, thank you very much. So at this time, can the council ask questions or should we go to public comment? So we'll go ahead and open a public hearing, starting with people in this room, and then we'll go online. So anyone in this room that wishing to speak for up to 3 minutes, please step forward.
I don't know if they even came. I guess his kids came.
Good evening. I'm Jim Perrine, and I previously owned this property at 3014 Lake Court. The issue really is about the temporary water source, and the reason a temporary water source is necessary is because the city committed more than 20 years ago to extend sewer and water facilities down Lake Court, and has not done so in over a 20-year period after they made that commitment. There were, and I thank Ms. Walsh for pointing out in the correspondence and laying out the history, some of the history. There's many other chapters of the history that I could tell you about, but we don't need to go into the back history. The issue is, where are we today? There is no water source down there. There is no sewer facilities down there. There have been discussions and evaluations of this over many decades. There have been commitments made by public agencies to do something about it, and yet nothing has been done. So another solution was sought to provide a temporary water source to allow for the use of the property. I say temporary because if the public facilities were ever put in, then the connections could be made. It would be desirable. I don't know about removing the tank necessarily at that point, because there wouldn't necessarily be a reason to remove the tank. The tank could be utilized for something else, such as stormwater storage, which I believe we're in favor of in this community. There was a previous gas service to this property, but that's irrelevant. Residences don't have to have a gas service to be a legal residence and habitable. And a gas service could be installed in the future. But what's that got to do with anything where we are today and the applications before you today? So I would suggest that and ask for your favorable consideration of this matter to deny the appeal, to allow the improvement down there on Lake Court, and so that we can enhance that section of the community, and a section of the community that many people in the area traverse on a regular basis, because there's a high number of people that go to the state park. They go through there. It's visible from the freeway. Do we want the city to have dilapidated buildings? And I'm not talking about the city facilities, but do we want dilapidated buildings? Do we want the properties to be run down, or do we want to see improvement?
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Hello, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. My name is Christina Medina Dirksen. I'm a resident of Marina and I was a former City Council member. I've worked with Mr. Perrine for the last 2 years to maneuver this issue as he's my constituent or was my constituent in District 3. And I worked very closely with him, getting him down a path and trying to find some solutions to this. I'm here in support of the work that he's done. I'm here to say thank you to the staff for taking on this very complex issue. And I do have a couple comments to make. Number one, I think it's very interesting that the reason that we're here today is kind of looking at a crystal ball for their future. His well was compromised by saltwater intrusion. So when we think about the future, coastal rising, those kind of things, you know, he's putting us in a position that we're really going to have to face. What are we going to do in the future? The concerns about the extension of the water line, that would be the perfect solution. That's what he's been advocating. It's quite expensive. It's gone between the Marina Coast Water District urging, yes, we should do this, but at the end of the day, it's very expensive. A piece of documentation I saw from 1976 had a $125,000 price tag back then. So I can imagine that it is much more expensive. So the points I want to make is that I think there's a solid solution in front of you. While I appreciate having more conditions, this is kind of a one-off property in our town. His property does have the distinction of being 10 years older than my house. My house was built in 1945. And if we think about the development of what happened in our city, some of these older homes have a lot of issues to them. Luckily, on my side of town, development followed around me and connections to waters and sewers and development happened. In his part of town, unfortunately, it didn't. And what happened was the seawater intrusion got in and compromised the water. So what I'm here to say is this is a very strong solution in front of you. The Planning Commission has given its blessing. There are some things that the neighbors will probably have to work out amongst themselves, but I've seen nothing but a willingness to compromise and to come up with solutions for Mr. Perrine and his family. It also strikes me as kind of interesting. I was reading through the minutes because I really appreciate the work that you all do from last council's meeting when you were talking about design standards. And one thing somebody had mentioned is about affordable housing and what do we as a body, I'm sorry, what do you as a body, what do you as our leaders, what solutions can we come to? Luckily, we've been doing a lot in our city, but here you have a family who is homeless. They are homeless, and homeless is defined, and depending how you define it, but you're doubled up as families. So I'm here to support his family, make sure that they have a home
Thank
and
you,
have a
Christina.
solution. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you very much. Okay, anyone else? Feel free to jump up and speak your mind up to 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Robert Esposo, and I'm here in support for Jeff's his vision for the property down there. I believe that the Planning Commission did their due diligence with the water and everything that Jeff's trying to work on. And homelessness is a big problem right now, and you know, although we can't solve homelessness in a big sense, we can solve one at a time. And I think this would help. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me this time. My name is Carlos Fuentes, and I'm a coworker of Mr. Jeff Bryan, and I'm here to support him, and I'm here to, to ask you that you please support his cause. I have seen him how hard he has been working to get his issue resolved. Has been, very stressed out, working really hard to find a solution. And one of the things I believe in is in building relationships and always trying to find the solution for the different difficulties that we face. And there is a group of people here, a big group of people supporting Mr. Perrine. And once again, because we believe in that, we believe in building relationship and again, finding a solution for the problems and not finding a problem for each solution, which I think, in my opinion, this is the case. He really needs this water tank. He really needs to be in his property, living in his house with his kids. So please give him that opportunity to install this water tank and have his problem solved. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Let's go online. Jeff Markham.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council and staff. As a member of the public, it's my opinion that the Planning Commission made the right recommendation in approving the conditions of use. Lake Court is a unique situation without doubt. Fundamentally, to me, this is a matter of private property and family ownership that transcends generations, and allowing a homeowner to be able to occupy their residence should be the primary concern, given that said use is within our municipal code. And according to our staff, this is the case. I urge the City Council to deny the appeal and validate the approval of the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Anyone else? Denise, Doug, Mike? Give you another moment. Okay, we'll close public comment. And I had some questions. In Tina's letter, it says that storage tanks should not be confused with reliable water sources, and she cites the Marina's zoning code. What is staff's response or city attorney's response?
Marina Municipal Code also in 2 places does allow for water storage tanks in all zones. So there may be consistency issues, but that's up for the council to kind of determine.
In those 2 references, does it indicate that storage tanks are reliable water sources?
That is not defined to my knowledge.
Okay, so is the requirement for a reliable water source part of our zoning code?
There is a requirement in the coastal regs that require a source of water. I'd have to double check the code closely to see if it defines that as, using those specific.
Okay, so I guess I'll ask our city attorney if this statement is correct or false.
So without looking at that Marina Code section, I couldn't tell you, but I could certainly take a glance at it. Yes.
Okay. And then how long would it take for us to get an opinion?
Give me just a few minutes.
Okay, moving on.
Mr. Mayor, could I just tag on to what
Sure.
you asked?
Sure, go ahead.
So in that question that the mayor asked, I think we know that we're talking about a source of water to a property, but when we add in reliable and also the issue of permanent versus temporary, I think those need to be defined along with that. Thank you, Renee.
You brought up the temporary versus permanent. We've heard from the applicant and his father that they're happy if this is a temporary solution. But it sounds like the permanent solution in their perspective would be that somebody else provides them a public water connection close enough that they could more or less easily connect to it. And I think that they may expect that outside agency to pay the bill. Would that be an appropriate use of public funds?
I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that question. Maybe the city manager might want to weigh in on that.
Generally, all developments in the city would require the developer landowner to bring the utilities to that property.
Okay. The reason I think that's important is because if I were to buy a home that was under $300,000 nowadays, that would be considered desirable by a lot of people who can't afford McMansions. So if water being as important as it is, costs, let's say, $200,000 and the property costs $30,000, you're in the ballpark of one of the most affordable homes up for sale. And so it doesn't seem to me to be an unjust permanent requirement that it be connected to public water source. I think I've probably used up my 5 minutes, so I'll come around again if everyone else has some things to say. So let's go to Councilmember Biala, and our city attorney can jump in anytime he's ready.
Yes, so that citation is the citation that allows water facilities, including water tanks. So I'm not sure what reference, what ordinance or what section of the code is being referred to for the proposition that reliable water sources need to be provided.
Okay, so our code doesn't require a reliable source for residential use.
Independently,
What do you mean independently?
like independent of the section that's being cited here?
Well, I guess first in this section, and then secondly, somewhere else. If there is no place in our code that requires a reliable water source, then this comment is mute.
Yeah, I think maybe taking it perhaps, I mean, to me, we would have to, number one, see if there's anywhere else in the code that talks about reliable water sources, but that's one question, which there may or may not be. But if this is a temporary solution, then we sort of can step away from that sort of reliability question.
So that moves us to the Monterey County Health Department saying that storage tank can be utilized as a temporary, but would not meet the standards of Chapter 15 as a permanent. So does that mean anything? Is that relevant, or is the applicant correct that the county has no real oversight here?
My understanding is the county does not have oversight here, and I think staff has.
That is
some
my
other-
understanding as well. The county would have oversight for a new well, but that is not what's proposed as part of this project.
Okay, well then at this point then is moot. It's a moot point, whatever the county said about.
Yes,
permanent.
I did contact the county myself when this application first came in to speak with the environmental health department about water storage, et cetera, and they had no permits required or any other direction for us to take.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Councilmember Biala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also would like to know if the issue of PG&E has nothing to do with this application. The appellant says, yes, it does, and the applicant says no.
Yes, I did verify that the home is currently served with a electrical panel through PG&E for electrical only. It does not have gas service. We are electrifying residential uses all over the state right now. It's conceivable that if your council allows the permit to go forward, he could go through all the building code requirements and have electrical only service.
Thank you. Also, I want to ask, I know that that we have one of our zoning district restrictions that says, well, it's not a restriction. It says basically that there can be storage tanks allowed, but you also inferred that there could be some restrictions to that. Are there any current restrictions to certain districts, numbers of restrictions for storage tanks in any given district?
The code does limit for small domestic storage tanks of 3 or fewer residences using one storage facility.
Okay, but not in any district per se. Are there any restrictions?
No.
So just limit to how many people can be using one particular. Okay, so that means then that anywhere else in the city that we could have somewhat of a more expansive use of water storage tanks.
That is possible. Probably not likely, as all of the rest of the city has direct connection capability to a water main in their street. But it is possible.
Okay, well, we don't really know how many of those residences currently would be availing themselves to that.
No.
Okay, because I don't recall any other private storage water tanks in the city that I'm aware of. So this would be, in my experience, the first.
Yeah, again, this is a very unique situation. It's not going to be repeated throughout the city. It just has to do with the way, I think I noted in the staff report that I believe this neighborhood was literally severed from the rest of the city when the highway went in.
Yeah.
So it's very unique.
Okay, well, that's pretty reassuring because having, a lot of storage tanks, they're obviously a bit unsightly. And so we'd have to be considering what kind of precedent or how many would be allowed. And so I think also Mr. Perrine spoke about the the owner liability for any malfunctioning. And so that would naturally discourage people, I think, from having their own, if they were trying to, for example, not use MCWD because the rates went too high and then suddenly people are asking for water storage. But I think that, there is a lot of liability for maintaining your own water source. So thank you very much. That's all for right now.
All right,
Mr.
thank
Mayor.
you, Kathy. Let's go to City Attorney Ortega.
Just want to clarify. So certainly the council can in the future limit water tanks in other parts of the city or impose additional requirements. Not in this specific council meeting, but certainly that can be brought back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McAdams.
Thank you, Mayor. On the slide regarding the basis of the appeal, I don't know if you want to bring that up, and that's where you have your staff's responses in green. I'm curious if the city attorney agrees with staff's responses and finds them, to be reasonable and per city code. I mean, obviously, Ms. Hunter, you're citing some code in your responses.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then also it is my understanding in, learning about this, like really this area of Marina is almost its own island, right? I mean, it's completely, in several documents, called out specifically and doesn't have the same, as a regular residential zoning, and also isn't in county jurisdiction, right? So it's kind of like its own area. So I really appreciate your work and thoroughness and how really complicated, but how far you have delved and made it not easy because this is very complicated, but just as far as understanding goes, have been very clear in that. So I appreciate that. And thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Jenny. Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not so much for this appeal, but in general, what options does the city have to enforce that garages, structures that are not meant to be used for living? What options do we have to enforce that they're not? If you look at the site plan, this is the garage that being proposed is the same size as the home, although the home is also small and the garage is not very large either. So, but just in general, suppose, the neighbor could complain like, oh, they say they were going to build a garage, but now they're using it as a living room or bedrooms.
So certainly that would be a code enforcement matter.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
So a complaint can be made to code enforcement can then investigate.
Thank you. And my questions already were asked and answered. So I do have one remark only for Tina Walsh's letter. Her last sentence, it's while it is true that a single family residence is an allowed use on the private land east of Lake Court, blah, blah, it is equally true the primary use envisioned for this property was for all to be eventually publicly acquired for public works purposes. And I know I asked the city manager, it seems we don't have any plans to acquire that for public use anymore at the moment.
It's not on our priority list, but we've had discussion with various state agencies who are very interested in that property long-term becoming public use. It's been mentioned that that's a wonderful access point to the coast, and I think a lot of agencies would be interested long-term in preserving that for a public access point to the coast.
So owners there should keep that in mind, or would that work for people who want to invest in their
Right.
homes?
That again, it's not our work plan. There's no one moving forward with any offers, but that is long term. It's expected to be a public facilities use. It mentioned at that time public works facilities, but currently the public use really is more improvements for access to the coast.
Okay, thank you, city manager. And it was also covered already in, I think this was the LUP. I hope I'm not mixing it up. It does already say in the absence of public acquisition, this area should be permitted to build out with one residence per existing parcel, provided that water requirements can be met. And we had the whole discussion about the water requirements. So I think I don't have any questions at the moment anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of general questions too to help me kind of frame what we're talking about. Ms. Hunter, I think you said we don't really have a good handle on how many tanks, or maybe you don't think there's a lot of tanks in the city, or do we know?
I don't have an answer of how many tanks might already be, like individual residential potable water. We do have municipal storage tanks under MCWD.
Just trying to understand what our ability to look at that data in the future is. Could we run a query every residence that's not connected to public water so that we understood presumably how many people may have things like tanks? And I mean, is that data that we could obtain?
We could obtain that potentially from the water district.
Okay. There's a huge tank over by the library that's kind of the old, kind of cool looking old school on stilts, and presumably doesn't even use a pump because it's gravity fed. Are you familiar with that tank?
I'm not able to picture it.
Okay, it serves,
Top of my head.
it's on a residence. I don't know if it serves that residence. I was just kind of curious if staff knew, but it sounds like not sure.
I don't know.
Same question for septic systems. Do we have any kind of visibility or understanding how many people are on septic?
To my knowledge, there is a neighborhood on Eucalyptus that has still some remaining septic systems that serve individual residences, but those are all connected to public water, I believe.
Okay. Did we do any research to try to understand if the Coastal Commission would deem this a substantial issue, this issue of portable water tanks?
We have not queried Coastal Commission staff as of this moment. After the Planning Commission action, I did send our notice of final action on a coastal development permit, which is standard procedure to the Coastal Commission. They did not, to Coastal Commission staff, and they did not have any immediate comment on it. But when I said that the appeal had been timely filed, I relayed that to Coastal staff, and they said, okay, then we'll put away the final action now and let us know what happens at the appeal hearing. So.
Okay. Sea level rise was mentioned a couple times by members of the audience. I know in some areas sea level rise is causing the water table to rise and therefore causing septic systems to fail. It does staff know if that could be an issue in this area or?
We did preliminarily talk with district engineer, the Marina Coast Water District engineer about septic, and they did not have concerns about that issue, but just bringing to the council's attention, condition number 8, which was added by the planning commission, which requires the testing, should provide that information. You know, if the existing system can handle the use, they look at the, I'm not a biologist, or a geologist, but you know, they look at the material that the leach field is installed in, and that's up to them to come up with their professional safety and operational opinion.
So you would feel confident that that opinion would take into account, let's say, the next 50 years of sea level rise, or?
I think that's what we have to go with right now as far as a professional opinion.
Okay. 2 more questions, Mr. Mayor, if I may. In the staff report, you talked about some examples of conditions that speak to the time element, right? That it would need to be, if the council wanted to go in that direction, it would have to be a time, like a fixed time amount, and then some other condition. Is there any way you could give some examples of what those other conditions might look like?
Well, one option for the council to consider is that if the tank was authorized as a temporary condition, we are undergoing a comprehensive local coastal program update right now, and this exact neighborhood is one of the identified focal points for assessment and analysis of what should be done, what changes should be made. As part of that discussion, there could be some potential for an agreement to extend public water down there. Certainly a very standard condition is once public water is provided, then automatically it's required you decommission the tank and connect to public water. So there are a variety of options I think you could come up with. Really just, you want to be sure that there's a defensible basis for what you're requiring. You know, you could have a 5 or 10 or 15 year, in 15 years from now, he needs to come back for renewal, but you'd want to have something by which you're measuring yes or no. You know, should the tank be allowed to stay, or should it be removed because some conditions have occurred?
I see. That's helpful. Last question for now anyway is, the courtyard has water, right? And help me understand that couldn't service this residence. Is that not enough supply, or?
I don't have all of the details off the top of my head, but Lane, did you want to?
Yeah, I don't believe if anything comes down there, it has to get up to code, to the Marina Coast Water District's code, and that's the issue.
Okay. And does the courtyard have sewer? Do we know?
No.
Okay.
They're not, it's not connected to public sewer.
So I know we're not talking about sewer tonight, but if we wanted to outfit these 2 residents or 3 residents with sewer, that would be a whole nother effort and presumably just as expensive, if not more so, than serving water.
I would presume so.
Right.
Yes.
That's it for now. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Thank you. So I think that residential uses provide eyes on the street, kind of make that area, which is very dark at night. And anyway, there's some safety aspects, safety enhancement to having residential down there. And I think there's also some, I don't want to be flippant, but it's kind of quaint and it's compatible with public state park access to have residences nearby. It kind of maintains this sort of hometown feel, not just public government feel. So I kind of like the way it is now, where there's still people living there on a daily basis. I think that's a good thing. My concerns are if the current owner was an expert in potable water maintenance and ambitious and able-bodied and able-minded, could probably do a really good job of keeping the water safe. If the occupant was not very expert or not very attentive, there could be problems in the water system that would affect the occupant and children or visitors. And so, what kind of and also, if the home is sold to another family, it could be senior citizens, it could be a single dad or a single mom with kids who aren't really up on water maintenance. And so, what role do we have to try to ensure a solution that's safe for these occupants and future occupants? Is that within our bailiwick, or are we out of our lane to be thinking about that?
It would become a private water system. So it would be up to the property owner. And, you know, if it became a rental property, the property management to ensure that everything's functioning properly. And like the city attorney mentioned, you know, that we do have code enforcement if something went awry and there was a code enforcement complaint, we would follow up that way.
Okay. Would we be within our lane of responsibility to require as a condition approval annual testing of the sewer system and the potable water system, that it maintain similar requirements as are provided by the testing of the public water, like arsenic and other things?
Well, one piece of information that I did just learn, the potable water provider is licensed by the state of California and has an active license to provide safe potable drinking water. So it is coming from a licensed
Yeah, I'm thinking of
provider.
you put clean water in and then it goes to the house.
Mhm.
And if there's any contaminants in the line or backflow issues, that's not the provider's issue.
Mhm.
That's the occupant's issue.
Mhm.
And so I'm asking whether that's within our scope to be thinking about that and maybe including some conditions of approval regarding that.
I would defer to the city attorney on this after I make one little comment. I come from a rural planning background where we have on-site water and septic all the time occurring together under a regulatory framework. And I have not worked in a jurisdiction that requires annual testing. It's basically you engineer your system, it's installed to spec, it's inspected, and you are off on your private system until something happens or indefinitely.
Okay. So I think if someone gets sick because it's not maintained, because it's a senior citizen couple, let's say in the future, that has no idea what's going on with their water, that people would say, well, who approved this? Who left these people vulnerable to this sort of thing? Do you expect senior citizens to be maintaining a water system to the standard the rest of the public enjoys? City attorney?
Yeah, I would say that there is probably some ability to do that, but I think it would be very limited. I thought what you were trying to get at was sort of more of a safety kind of the condition of the tank to make sure that it's not gonna, all of a sudden create a situation for the neighborhood in terms of the water leaking out. I would say you have probably more authority in that respect than you would for the actual health and safety standards in the water line. I think it's difficult to define where, for example, is it in the plumbing? Is it in the system itself? So you kind of it gets a little complicated with trying to regulate that sort of safety standard.
Okay.
And in addition to that, just to draw your attention to condition 14 is our standard indemnification condition that we add to all entitlements that does hold the city harmless for things like what you're suggesting.
Yeah, that wasn't my concern, but I could have been thinking about that as well. That's not an incidental concern. Okay, let's go to Councilmember Biala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we've cited a whole lot of regulations and all of that. So I just want to kind of have a general framework to say if there's conflicting information or details in one or the other. So at the lower part, I guess we consider Marina's municipal codes, and then there is our coastal zoning ordinance, and then above that is the city's land use plan, and then the county, and then the LCP, which is consistent with the coastal commission. So that kind of like is the hierarchy. So in general, how do we look at this? If we would like all of them to be at least consistent with each other, but as we know, laws get formed and, you know, it gets pretty messy. So if something conforms to our municipal code, that may be misaligned or maybe not covered in other ones. Does that hold supremacy over the other ones, or how does that all work?
So the city's local coastal program was certified by the Coastal Commission in 1982, and it has been amended, and those amendments certified over the years. That certification ensures that our LCP is in alignment with the Coastal Act. So,
and is our marina codes and zoning consistent with the LCP?
and our existing municipal code that governs coastal zoning is the implementation plan from that original certification.
Okay, so it should be aligned. If not mirroring the details, at least it's aligned in intent.
Correct.
Okay, so the questions that we've been talking about that may not relate specifically to this property, there will be things that kind of evolved out of our discussion, but in terms of trying to codify reliable water source in the coastal zone and safety standards, as the mayor has mentioned, all of that, we could wait until the LCP, because that gives us a lot of oomph if we are going to go ahead and, right? So we don't even have to try to have a separate meeting on this. We just wait for the comment period and our input into the LCP, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
For the coastal zone portion of the city, that's definitely something that should be considered as part of the LCP update. For outside the coastal zone, your council could direct staff
I see.
to pursue other amendments like the city attorney mentioned to try to resolve this issue.
Right. And so let's say our LCP revision called for a connection to the MCWD water line. And then you suggested that even if we approve this today with a storage tank, then it automatically would somehow revert to this property needing to conform or they're grandfathered in.
If that is what the council wants, you should add a condition of approval that expressly requires connectivity once the public water line is installed.
Or if it is not consistent with the future revised LCP.
Well,
Because
the
we could
LC
decide at the LCP level that we can say storage tanks are fine.
So the LCP, if the planning commission and the public and council go this route, the LCP could include a policy that says the city supports extension of the public water line all the way to the end of Lake Court, but that is a Marina Water Coast District function. So we can't demand that they do that. But we could certainly include policies that the city supports the extension of water and sewer.
And then any decisions that we make today, are those grandfathered in? So regardless of what happens on our LCP update in the future, they would still be,
Yes,
we'd still committed to this decision.
If the council upheld the planning commission's approval, then this would exist and any changes would create a non-conforming situation on this property.
So for the next owner, they would have to comply.
No, the non-conformity goes with the land, not the ownership. So if this all goes through and he establishes the storage tank and then sells the property in 10 years, the existing conditions this permit goes with the land. So whatever is concocted tonight will follow whatever ownership of the land.
Okay.
City Attorney Ortega?
Yes, if I may. So maybe perhaps try to get at that issue you're raising, council member, imposing a time limit might be a way to do that so that you can have a sort of time frame where you're sort of revisiting this issue. Maybe the amendments to the local coastal program have happened by then. And so you can sort of look at it through the lens of the coastal program as amended.
Okay, thank you.
All right. The applicant and perhaps his father spoke about improving the neighborhood. And when I see it, the vision of a new storage tank visible from Highway 1, there's pros and cons to that. It's good that it's supplying water to a family to live there. It's bad that as you look toward the ocean, you see a storage tank. So how visible will the storage tank be from the freeway?
I don't think it will be visible at all. The freeway is 30 feet, 40 feet higher than,
Because right now you
Yeah.
look down into the backyards and you can see the homes and the yards. And sometimes during campaigns, they put signs on their roofs, which are readily legible or readable from the freeway. So why wouldn't a storage tank be visible?
it will be at the foot of the, according to the plot plan, it'll be at the toe of the slope of the freeway, like if you're looking for it, you can probably see it as you're driving by at
Okay.
70.
So
Right.
if it's not a onerous condition for it not to be visible, what verbiage could we use to ensure that it's not visible from the freeway? Substantially visible, easily visible?
It could, if it's a standard dark green tank, it would be less visible. It would fit, it would,
So what language could we
Blend
use
in.
as a condition of approval?
you could have a condition of approval that says the tank shall be of a dark green color so that it blends in with the surrounding vegetation.
All right. City manager.
Or maybe a suggestion that when they look at the site location, just where as practical as possible to locate it and situate it so that the impact or the view from the freeway is minimized as much as possible.
Yeah, it is up against the back property line at the toe of the slope. So anywhere else on the property, it will be more visible because it will be heading west from the freeway.
Please, Jeff. Okay, Councilmember McAdams?
Thank you, Mayor. And that's actually the question I had was the aesthetics of the water tank and what sort of conditions. I mean, obviously we don't want like a neon pink water tank, but if we don't say specifically what the expectations are, then we'll be in a predicament sort of like we are now where it's not said. So I definitely think that it's important to call out, however it is called out. And also, the language needs to be in a way where it's pretty certain and defines what would be allowed with the look of the water tank and not allowed. So, I mean, obviously we don't want one that's 40 feet above the highway with a neon sign. I mean, I'm being extreme, but if we don't say it, we are leaving ourselves open to surprises. So I think that's, I appreciate that you're headed down that path too. So something that I was thinking about with the garage, because it's not inhabitable, however, it is new to the property. There are some pretty lenient laws right now, in the state of California regarding ADUs and JADUs and tying on to existing utilities. So you don't need a new sewer. You can tie onto water, et cetera. How does this property sort of fall into that if the owner were to come in and wanting a, pretty much over the counter ADU permit?
Yes, that's a really good question. So this property is zoned public facility, and it's in the coastal zone. So those are two things that automatically remove it from the statutory ADU easy peasy style of doing things. ADU law is for residential zones. So the public facilities zone in the coastal regs specifically says one single family residence. So I think there are some safeguards in that regard. Also, I mean, if, again, going back to code enforcement, you know, if that is converted illegally, I'm sure there would be eyes on it and we would hear about it. So it cannot legally be converted to an ADU through the state law.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. And that is also another provision or language that I would consider including, just so it's clear. Because what I hear from you, the non-conforming portion of the property is going to be going, you know, to whoever new owner. And so even though that might be, you know, part of like, you know, a real estate contingency or compliance or something like that, like I think it would be smart and prudent for the city to sort of call that out too. So there's no miscommunication or, you know, no one will be stuck with a property thinking that they could tie into the utilities when really they can't. So that's something that I would appreciate the council to consider.
Okay. I'm trying to write down what might be part of our motion that we build, but make sure that your ideas are considered for that motion build. Let's go to Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I didn't realize, I don't think there's a height limit in the approval. So although it says, you know, it has been added for that future garage, has been written in 16 feet max.
Yes.
So it would be good to have a maximum height for the tank. And we could require that shrubs be planted between the tank and the back.
Shrubs or redwood trees?
That's it. Or live coastal, oh, what is it? Native, yes. So I don't know how space, but I mean, there are shrubs. I know in the new developments, that's often a requirement when people are allowed to have a shed, but it needs to be screened with shrubs that are whatever, not higher than 2 feet above the height of the structure or something like that. And in this case, there's no height limit, I guess. So for the shrubs, but for the and for the rest, I know we can see it from the freeway, and I sometimes on purpose look down because I like seeing those small homes there. But most of the time, well, you either pay attention to the traffic if you go 70 miles per hour, or you look at the ocean and the dunes. So I'm not too concerned about the water tank there. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Biala?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Allison, when do we think that our LCP update will be completed? She's smirking.
That's a $1 million question. We have officially kicked it off. We will be having our first public workshop on April 27th, just as an informational, you know, very, very, very early, just informational. But the comprehensive LCP, I would say from city side of things, will probably take a year and a half, and then maybe 2 years. And then once it's shipped off to the Coastal Commission, there's really no.
Right, right. So I'm just thinking in terms of putting a time limit on the approvals for the water storage tank, like if we said 5 years, so that would sort of cover that. And, you know, and if we don't do any changes, then it's just a matter of, you know, a renewal based on no changes. But if there were changes, we could accommodate some of those at that time. So 5 years, do you think would be?
I think that would be appropriate. I would request that the motion include some parameters for what is the council looking for in 5 years for renewal. Some kind of change condition, or otherwise it's just a renewal without.
Right. If there's any changes in the LCP that talks about connections to a water main, whether it's approved or not by MCWD, or whether it's paid for by some other entity or whatever. So something along
So like a regulatory.
Right. Would that be a condition that would seem reasonable in light of we're really not sure what the LCP revisions are going to be?
I think city attorney, did you have
I
any?
say yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, so if let's go to Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wondering if I could get some clarity on what Councilmember Biala was saying. I thought what I heard was if this gets approved tonight and then the LCP comes about and says, let's say every residence must connect to potable water or city water, we could not then go back and immediately require this residence to connect to water. Is that right?
That's correct. I think, but you could revisit it as part of a renewal.
Okay.
So to cut to the quick, could the motion tonight say that within 5 years, this property must be connected to public water?
I think that would be potentially not impossible for the applicant to achieve, but
And what would be the main, is it money? Is that the main obstacle?
the cost to extend the 2,000 or so feet to the existing main is prohibitive.
So
but-
then what difference would it make if we said 10 or 15 years? It'd be even more expensive, correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
So sort of what you're kind of indicating is that it's impractical to demand that this residential property ever be connected to public water.
I think it's,
Unless it's provided by the water company or the city or something like that.
well, that is the question to the council, is the interpretation of the regulations that apply to this property.
All right, to our city manager, has MCW ever indicated that they would like to, or would be willing to pay for this connection?
No, in talking with them, they've said no, they
Say if it's for one house, that house needs to provide the
yeah,
funding.
they've been consistent with that. They did tell me that about 20 years ago, that they had actually gone through a process to create a community facilities district, and it wasn't approved by the landowners, and so that that is always still an option out there. That was created, then that the money is put up front to pay for that, and then the landowners would pay that back over time. But again, that has to go up for them to vote, and previously they turned that down.
All right, let's go back to Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'll be the first to kind of crack and say, I fully support doing something to get Mr. Bryan and his family back in this unit. Having said that, I have some concerns that I think I've heard echoed throughout this day is about the intent of what we try to pass tonight or allow tonight, creeping into something else in the future. Or ending up as being something that we didn't intend for it to be tonight. And so I would hope that if we move in the direction of denying the appeal, that, as Councilmember McAdams said, that we very methodically kind of think out some of those loopholes, right, that might allow for that creep. And to that extent, if through the mayor, I would like to ask Mr. Bryan, I mean, the garage is pretty large, right, by garage standards.
No.
Is that 40?
Wait, well, before you go on, if you could come to the microphone, please.
And if I could ask staff, is that 40 feet to staff first?
Yes, it's 12 by 40 feet. It's a 2-car garage.
Okay, and is that pretty standard for a 2-car tandem garage? Is that
The square footage.
That is the standard 2-car garage. It's slightly unusual in that it's tandem, but that's
Okay.
only because of the configuration of the lot.
okay? That's
Yeah, you guys have to keep in mind the residence itself is 40 by 12. It's a small, tiny footprint. If I can, while I'm up here, I'd like to address a
No,
couple.
Jeff, I'm sorry, because your 10 minutes is up, but we might ask you more questions.
Okay.
Did you have more
I'd
questions?
like to
for the
clarify a
applicant?
lot of things that you guys are discussing, but
Thank you, Jeff.
and I appreciate the clarity on the 40 feet. I mean, to me, it seemed big, but I'm not a builder, right? And so,
Yeah, I
It-
think just looking at it on the site plan next to the very small house
sure,
makes it look big.
okay. I think that's it for me right now, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Councilmember Biala?
I just want to clarify too, what I'm saying in terms of the time limit for the approval is in the face of an LCP that has not yet been codified. Because it could be that that it clarifies what we're struggling with here, that storage tanks can be done and here are the standards or the safety measures could be codified at that time. There is a whole lot of things that we could use the LCP update to make sure that we're not sitting here again trying to figure these laws out on our own, that a higher body, the LCP, has codified those things. That was my intent on having this, because it could be that we make no changes, but we could also get some really good benefits from that. And whatever comes out of it, I don't want us to say that it's negligible, that we might not have anything in the future that might change. Maybe, who knows, maybe we do have, a public entity wanting to come in and buy it, and it's a whole different ballgame. And maybe Mr. Perrine is thinking this is a great opportunity for me. I don't know that we can predict all of the things that could happen, and I just wanted that outlet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so back to my question about requiring public water connection by heck or high water, meaning by a public agency or by the owner of the residence. What authority do we have or don't have to do that?
You have authority to do that.
Okay, so a condition of approval theoretically could be to connect to a public water service source by whatever means, whoever's paying the bill, public or private, within a certain amount of years.
Yes.
X years, 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is. And then when the LCP comes along to be updated, it could either solidify that, or it could recommend that not be the case, right? The LCP could say that it would be okay if there wasn't public water to all residences in this zone. And then when it came up to review for city council could say, oh, the LCP has been updated and they don't require it, so we don't think it's fair or warranted to require it. Or the LCP could be consistent with a ruling tonight in our motion that that all private residences on Lake Court be connected to a public water. The reason I bring this up is because to me, that's the ultimate improvement to the neighborhood, is to have a safe, reliable, permanent water source to whoever is living there, whatever their condition might be as far as ability to move around or ability to figure things out. When the public water system, you don't really have to think much. Just call a plumber if you have a problem inside the house, but the supply of the water, you don't even think about that. Okay, Councilmember Vischer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to mention, if we built in that requirement, I would like to give the owners plenty of time to save their money to hopefully be able to connect.
Okay, would you be amenable to asking this applicant that question? What might be a reasonable time frame?
Yes.
Okay. If the applicant, Mr. Perrine, could come up. He's consulting with his lawyer. Right?
Okay.
Well,
So go ahead and ask the question. One moment, please, Mr. Perrine. Go ahead,
So
Councilmember
what
Vischer.
would you consider a reasonable amount of time for you to be able to, or not to be able to? If it would be required for you to connect to the public water?
well, I would ask you the same question, ask all of you the same question. If I had a crystal ball and I could predict the future and say, this is what's going to happen, I could probably accurately answer that question. But without the ability to predict the future and to know what happens in life when the LCP is actually finalized, what happens in between now and then, it's really hard to accurately answer that question. But the issue with extending the water main is not necessarily the cost. It's the legality of what happens if there is a break in the water main.
Okay, for now, Mr. Perrine, the question was, how long would be reasonable?
But that's a very important point.
We understand that, and we'll get to that
And
in a moment.
it's already
Mr.
been
Perrine,
established
please, Mr.
by
Perrine,
a
you're out of
special
order. Jeff.
assessment
Please sit
district
down,
to pay
Jeff.
for it.
You're out of order, Jeff. So let's ask our city attorney about the liability question. Could there be some kind of legally binding agreement that discloses who's responsible in case there was a leak or problem in
So
the
that,
main line?
that would be in agreement with MCWD as to
And-
who would be responsible and the person who is requesting the water line be extended.
Right.
So that it would be as between, like I said, MCWD and the owner who is requesting the water line be extended. I'm
Right.
sure that any requirements that MCWD has would have to be met in the installation of the line.
Right. Now, usually when a city line goes in, the city is responsible up to the street and then from the street to the house. So is it possible that if this line was put in by MCWD, that they would be responsible to the end of the street?
Without looking at their requirements, it seems reasonable that they would undertake some responsibility for maintaining that line once it was installed.
So then to address the question of, well, who would be liable if there's a break? That question would necessarily be answered in whatever paperwork exists between MCWD and the owner of the property when that line went in.
Correct.
So it wouldn't be a question, oh my gosh, there's a break in the line, who's
That's
responsible?
correct.
It would be known in advance.
That's correct.
Okay. Councilmember McAdams?
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to confirm that if the council supports staff's recommendations this evening, that is not in any way committing the city in the future, whether, we have a different council, different mayor, different staff, that's not committing the city to providing this future utility infrastructure or putting the city in like a vulnerable position to say, oh, well, you gave us the permit, so that meant that you were signing up to pay for providing this this water service to this resident.
No, it would not be committing the city to do that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so from council, the last thing I'd like to hear is it reasonable for the city to look at it as if someone is buying a piece of property and we want it to be affordable? Here is a piece of property that has no water connection. It would cost up to 200 grand, maybe less, maybe more. And that would be far less than the cost of a home. So are we putting overly onerous condition on a prospective homeowner to require a water connection that might cost that much? Or is that a reasonable expectation, given that everybody else is paying quite a bit more to be able to have a single family residence that has the normal amenities that everyone enjoys? To me, that's kind of an ethical, no. To me, that's an operational question. And I'm kind of leaning toward, every homeowner has to afford the expenses of a home, and that would be within the realm of reasonableness, to say the least, because it's quite reasonable. Or maybe it's not even an appropriate question. So I'd like to hear from the rest of council, because to me, that's the stickiest part of a motion that we might make tonight, given what I've heard. Councilmember McAdams?
Thank you, Mayor. And I mean, as far as me jumping in, my sort of immediate reply is that is, for me as a policymaker, going out of my lane. I am, very black and white. What is the city code? What is staff saying? And so for me, to make my decision, that's how I go down the path where I'm going. And it is hard to separate, right? And I hear your concerns, especially exactly what you're saying. An older couple, I wouldn't know how to care for a water tank. I wouldn't have the foggiest idea. So I understand where you're saying. And for me, it's to make sure that the city isn't in a vulnerable position, which I've heard that we're not. And that we're following the law, and so I'm also very black and white to that, and we may be different.
No, that's very good. Thank you for that. Councilmember Biala?
I think that the connections to the main water lines is the aspirational aspect, and I think that that's what we hope for all residents. So that should not be seen as inconsequential. I think that that's sort of a basic, to me, a basic requirement for all residents to have that kind of service. But the timeline, I don't know that I'm saying specifically that we have to mandate, we have to put that in writing. I'm just saying that we need to slow it down so that in 5 years or 10 years or whatever we decide, that if things have changed and we can't necessarily predict, it might be in favor of the applicant, it might be in favor of the city's needs. But I would like a sort of time frame in which we can say, we want to reconsider. We want to put it out again and discuss all the options again and see if there are things that we could facilitate to make some of this happen. That's all I'm saying. I'm not willing to say that we demand in 5 years that the, the applicant have connections to the water main, because that involves MCWD. But our aspirations will be codified in the LCP update. And I would like another discussion, and that might open up more possibilities than what we could imagine today about the possibility of water to the 3 sites in your neighborhood. We just can't predict. So I just want to slow it down and say that things could change fairly radically, and we want to be prepared to discuss it again. That's all I'm saying, because these are important issues, not only just a principle of what is it that we want for all residents, and that's good, clean water in a system that is going to take the reliabilities for safety of water, drinking water. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that we make that timeline in which they have to convert to a water main. And just this is a small issue. If we're looking at the colors, I would like to see not this green, but a sand color so that it blends in with the environment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the sand color. I forgot to mention that earlier. I thought green will stick out probably. But I also agree with Councilmember McAdams. I really looked at this. No, I don't think it's future development or new development. So they are not required to connect to the public water. So, and a water tank is considered to be a good solution. And if we would like to build in a condition to look at it again, like Councilmember Biala said, I think 5 years really short. I would go for at least 10, just because time flies, as we all know.
You mean time to relook at it in what perspective?
So if we decide to give a time limit to the condition as a condition to the permit, then I would do at least 10 years to come back to reapply. And then by that time, everybody will know more than we do now.
Okay.
But 5 is here before we know it.
Okay.
Yes.
So how about before we build a motion, we give the applicant and the appellant 3 minutes to say whatever they have on their minds based on what they've heard, because it's really frustrating to sit out in the audience and hear us talk about them and not be able to speak.
And can I add one thing? I think we also should build in that if by miracle somebody extends the public utilities to Lake Court, then yes, they need to connect to that new water line that Marina Coast has paid for within 2 years or so after it has been established.
City manager, do you have any idea how much it costs to connect in this scenario? If the main line was installed? Is it $5,000, $50,000?
I don't know what it is. It's quite expensive, and the connection fees will be going up. I've been attending their rate hearings. And
What are they now?
I don't recall.
Okay. So connection fee plus construction, we're talking a pretty hefty bill, even if there's a main line right out to the street. Okay. Okay, so let's go to the applicant first. Jeff, come on up. You have up to 3 minutes to.
Okay, thank you. Um, a few things. One thing I want you guys to keep in mind as we contemplate this and the process and how long it's taken and how long it takes is every single day that goes by, every single night that you go home and sleep, me and my son are in a homeless situation. Don't lose sight of that. With regards to any type of time limit, I think it's not unreasonable to say in 10, 15 years, you say, let's have this discussion again. I'm not in favor of any imposed fees at that time. Keep in mind that by allowing this, by denying this appeal and allowing me to move forward, you're allowing me to occupy this home. And everybody knows that a home that is lived in is kept in good condition and beautifies the area if you're a responsible citizen and a responsible neighbor. If I'm not allowed to do that, then we look at the history of this property falling into disrepair and being a blight. So don't get too hyper focused on the color and looks and dimensions of the water tank, because they only make water tanks in certain colors and certain heights for certain gallons. I just can't create one myself. The water tank itself is certified for potable water. That's something that you have to get when you do a potable water tank. You have to get one that's certified for potable water. The city does have the power to extend the water main to move forward with the special assessment district. And that is how we pay to get the water main extended. The special assessment district, which has been discussed, which was established, or which was never established, but which was paid for to do an engineer's report back in 2007, has never moved forward. I'm not asking the city to spend a penny here. This has zero fiscal impact on the city. I would gladly connect to Marina Coast Water District once it's made available on Lake Court. And I would gladly participate in the special assessment district.
Thank you, Jeff.
One last thing.
Jeff, your time is up. Okay, so let's go to the applicant. If the applicant wishes to speak, the appellant, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tina.
Well,
We can hear you.
okay. Hello. I wasn't expecting to have to speak again.
You don't have to speak. You have the opportunity to speak.
Well, I really appreciate all the discussion that you're having there. I think Mayor Delgado has got the best handle on it, in my opinion. Mr. Prine paid very little for the property because it had this problem of having no water. I think he's probably paid under $50,000 for what he's got right now. So for him to put in a water main at his own expense, or not a water main, but a water line, and pay for that himself, that would still be an affordable house. The assessment district, I did participate with the MCWD discussions in that. I was in favor of doing the assessment district. I think it would benefit everybody. But everybody does have to pay a share, divided up however the district divides it up. And it would be a lot of money, but it would be paid out over time. It would be like having a mortgage or investing in your property. If you're going to develop a property, you have to expect to have to spend money to develop it. That's just the way it is. I believe that if he were to try and put a water line in on his own, that it would have to meet water district standards before they would allow him to connect. I have a water line that was put in by a previous owner of my property, and unfortunately that water line didn't meet the specs of the water district, so they will not maintenance that. I have the responsibility all the way down Lake Court, all the way up to where the school is. And I don't know why the staff report keeps insisting that I'm connected through the courtyard, because I am not. I have no connection or ties with the city with my water. I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that's my opinions on what I've heard so far. And I think it's a very important issue, and I really think that you should take some more time than just tonight to try to decide what you want to do. So, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tina. I think that I'm most swayed by those on the council here who've said, you know, what's the law, what's the code? And although my preference is connecting to water ASAP to be a real permanent solution, safe for everyone who might live there in the future, it's really not required. And so it's probably not my place to go beyond what's required, especially when it would cost a lot of money, even though in my opinion, it's a reasonable amount of money. It's not, you know, it's not my property, it's not my money, so I shouldn't be making decisions regarding other people's finances. So thank you for that affirmation. So let's start to build a motion. I'll motion that we deny the appeal, and as conditions of approval, in addition to those the Planning Commission has made, then we add that the water tank visibility will be minimized, of a sand or other color that blends in as much as possible, that we confirm that no ADUs would be allowed in writing, that we confirm that there be no residential use of the new garage, and that if public water connection was provided down Lake Court, that it would be a requirement for the owner to connect to that. And I will stop there to get a second. Build, delete, modify as we want, but let's get a second first.
A second.
Okay, so now let's build in and make sure everyone's happy with this motion. Councilmember Fisher?
To connect to that water line within 2 years or so after the public utility.
That's good.
Yes,
Yeah. Is that reasonable? Yes, within 2 years, if and when
after it has been completed.
public water is provided at street level. Okay, that's good. Allison would say that's verifiable.
Yes.
Anything else, Councilmember Fisher?
The size of the water tank, I understand it's a
5,000?
standard size. So how can we build that in?
I don't think you need
the
to.
height,
The
because it's
$5,000.
just the standards, and they cannot put it. They won't do that. I mean, why would they put it
Right.
up higher?
Smallest height of it.
If we're concerned about the height, the visibility.
Yeah, your condition could be crafted the shortest tank possible to meet the 5,000.
And installed on a standard height or whatever.
Okay, so we'll put that into the motion.
Thank you.
Anything else?
That was it for me. Thank you.
Councilmember McCarthy?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if I heard your comments about the ADUs. Would it be more encompassing to say that the council at the time of renewal has to find no future or new or future development? And I guess that's kind of a question for both the mayor and city attorney.
I didn't think it through, so whatever language is appropriate.
I don't think that the renewal was yet part of the motion.
Right. So
Okay.
let's talk about the renewal. If you want the renewal to be part of this motion, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so I would suggest that at time of renewal that the city council find that no new or future development exists from the time
Okay.
this was granted.
And the applicant indicated that 10 years would be reasonable to have another discussion. So would you like to say renewal 10 years?
That sounds reasonable to me.
Okay, is that, I guess Allison and legal and city manager think that's reasonable. So how do we word that? To put that into the motion, that there would be, that this would need to be renewed in 10 years?
You could start it with renewed in 10 years and the renewal shall include an assessment of the property to ensure no additional development other than what is authorized right now.
Okay, so to ensure compliance of the conditions. Okay,
And then the only other issue that I'm kind of tossing around in my head, and it's one that I hadn't thought of before this hearing, is this issue of septic tank. And so I'm wondering if in that 10 years, should we be worried about the status of the tank? Right, because if we're putting water into it, and if it is, I don't know how long they usually last, but I should know because my grandfather pumped septic tanks and I went with him many times, as I can still smell today. But is it worth having that discussion? I guess that's more of a question for the council, really.
yeah, let's ask city manager.
And the just to clarify, the thought process being, right, we're putting water into it. We talked about sea level rise causing septic tanks to fail. I would hate to be in a situation where future citizens look at this council and say, what idiots, they didn't consider that this, of course, the septic tank was going to fail, right? So I'm just trying to get my hands around whether we should address that tonight or not.
So questions, Allison. So what are the county regulations requiring inspection of septic tanks?
I haven't looked into the county's inspection, but like I said previously, mostly they are complaint based, or I don't know of counties that require a certain time inspections, except for possibly a mound system, which is a different kind of septic system, which this would not be.
I was just going to add that, I mean, this would just go along with the other sort of reviewing all other conditions of approval.
Right, at
to
the renewal.
ensure
period.
consistency with those.
Mhm.
Okay,
At the
so
renewal period.
I'm going to say then that I'm not going to recommend that. But again, I just wanted to have the discussion, and based on what I just heard from staff, that won't be a recommendation for me. So that's it from me, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Biala?
Yeah, I think our development here of the conditions is really great. Because and I want to thank Councilwoman Vischer about the putting a 2-year compliance if in fact we get a connection for the main water line, and also Councilmember McCarthy's suggestion about renewal within 10 years, because that all then encompasses my concerns about any kind of changes in LCPs and the conditions of participation, conditions of approval also have the safety standards that the mayor has talked about. So whether it's septic tank or any other potable water issues, they're all covered in the conditions of approval. So I think that we've really crafted something very comprehensive, and I think that it meets everything that I had in mind too. So I'm very pleased with how this has come out. Thank you,
Kathy.
Mr. Mayor.
Let's go to Councilmember McAdams.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to echo Councilmember Biala's comments about this motion and the conditions. I too am pleased, and I'm glad that, appeals for me sometimes with housing is just a barrier. I appreciate, your tenacity and how long this has taken, and the time and the energy and the effort. And so for me, I'm glad that we were able to, come to where we are, be in agreement, still have protections for the city. And also, we are still supporting a housing dwelling. And for me, that says a lot as far as our political will and our ability to collaborate. So thank you.
My overall comment is I'm supportive of the motion, of course, like everyone I think sounds like are. And to the Perrine family, I want to say, echo, your tenacity, of course, like bulldogging this for a long time. And now tonight, maybe it's going to come, sounds like it's come to fruition for you. And I think that having multiple families on that street is better for everybody. And I'm not just thinking about current or near future families. I'm thinking, long-term, decades. Better to have 2 or 3 families than to have 1 family, et cetera. So I think there is an overall improvement if there's more families down there on a regular basis. Okay, let's go to Councilmember Biala.
I just want to say that what seemed to have been a very small area to deal with this issue of water to one, and there's so few people there in anyway, but I want you to know that this has really stimulated our whole council on very much larger issues. And so I found this discussion really fruitful. So you have brought some really key issues for us to struggle with beyond your one development and home. So we appreciate this opportunity to hash through this for us. It solidifies our values too, and the direction that we all want to take here up on the dais for the benefit of the community. So thank you. Thank you, Allison, for all your work. This has really been an amazing project from the standpoint, even with sort of the legal issues that our attorney has been so involved in researching, and you have too. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Okay. Any more comment before we go to a vote? Councilmember McCarthy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know the audience is probably getting frustrated with us all pontificating up here, but to tag on to what you said, the applicant has already spent, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 to $5,000 just to get to this point, which is a tremendous barrier in and of itself. And I think what you just said another way, it will be my words. If the applicant was to try this another 10 years from now, I'm not so sure it'd get approved. So I'm glad that the applicant has bulldog, to use the mayor's words, to get to this point. And I hope it's a solution that works for, everybody, for the betterment of the city and the betterment of the applicant. So thank you, Mayor.
All right. Okay, so let's go to a vote, please. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So that motion passes unanimously. Thank you to staff. Thank you to the occupants. Thank you to the friends of the family. So careful what you ask for. You got a lot of work ahead of you, right? All right. Let's take a 3-minute break just to allow folks to get on with their evening. We'll see you back here in
10 years. They will just
3 minutes.
verify compliance with the conditions, not that the permit has to be renewed. That's a different kind of conversation. They said renewed.
Oops. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am going to start my presentation, a bit of a spoiler alert. And that's at the end of the presentation here, there's no action to take tonight by the council. So that's the good news. So I had a conversation earlier today with our FAA representative, and it turns out this action isn't needed at this point in time. So because we had this on the agenda already, we figured run through a couple of things just to update you on what's going on at the airport, if that's still the desire. So everybody's aware that we have an airport layout plan and that we have an airport master plan that has land uses broken up. And the reason this is kind of important to keep in mind, a lot of times, people think that we can just do whatever we want at our airport. And there are certain specifications to certain land uses that can go in certain areas. So anything that's in yellow there, you'll see is considered an aviation use, and aviation uses are supposed to go there. We've also got next door an airport business park plan. This has been developed in concert with the UCM Best Center. And the idea is that we build a larger campus that has uses that support academic research and innovative type things in the future. Currently, our airport section of this business park plan is a bit on hold while we work through an ITP situation, which was before the council a while ago. And very soon we'll be bringing back again with different development scenarios. But we're working with Denise Duffy and Associates on that. So what we were submitting to in the ACIP for this year was just a revision to our program. And you'll see by looking at this chart here that this year, what we were looking to do was just design this taxi lane rehab of, or the concrete of the area. Another project so we're reshuffling some things. Another project that we're looking to do in 2 years then after we start the construction of this is some groundwork for some additional hangars. And so if you look at the diagram here, you'll see the dark blue line. That is the section of the taxi lane that was on the subject of the project this year. We're also waiting for anticipating this MAP program to open. And we've been talking about this for a couple of years. I asked to get on the call today and it's just not open yet. I guess the federal government's trying to get their funding together or something. But we're waiting, and as soon as it opens, we're going to be submitting, and we're anticipating being able to get awarded into that program and be able to build some hangars and rehab a lot of the buildings that are out there further. Just really quickly, again, we're looking to build more hangars, and that's to really accommodate Joby in a lot of ways, because the larger footprint we have of Joby, the more we need to accommodate the general aviation users out there. So we're looking to create more hangars that will accommodate both uses so everybody can live well together. So Joby has submitted their 226,000 square foot project. The Planning Commission approved it on the conceptual plans. So this is going to be in place of the former project that they have. And if you orient yourself just to it would be the left on the diagram, but it's to the west is where the big tent is. When you drive down the reservation, you'll see. Joby also has 2 hydrogen projects that we're processing right now through the FAA. So the first one is what we call a temporary one, and this is out in the middle of the tarmac all by itself. And it is a temporary site, but we still have to get approval from the FAA. And the second one is a permanent facility. And this one is going to be located, we call it Building 507. It's 3200 Emgen. So again, if you're going down Emgen Road, it would be the first building you see on the right. Just past that is where this facility would be located.
And Matt, once it's permanent, there won't be any storage tanks on it.
They will be
just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
So I'm not going to get really technical because that's the scientist part, but they are looking to infuse hydrogen into batteries to make those batteries go further. So it's kind of like a hybrid in the air, if you will. And that's pretty much the end of my presentation. I just wanted to point out that it's a busy place out at the airport right now. This is, they are called the Army, I just blanked on it, the Army Riggers, I guess. They came in last year and they spent 2 weeks in our airport and they want to come back again. It's kind of a throwback to what the airport was at one time. But they all parachuted in and they practiced setting up a base camp and lived out of it for 2 weeks. And I guess it was pretty impressive. And like I said, they're going to be back. We also have other small users who maximize our revenues and everything out there. But that's all I have tonight.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt? Councilmember Biala?
So when the Army uses it, they are paying us for
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. This is something maybe the press would really be interested in seeing. I mean, it's very unusual.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. So, Lane, I guess we can move on then. All right. Thanks again, Matt, for that presentation.
Quick question for me, Mr. Mayor, if I
Oh,
may.
sure. I'm sorry, Brian.
A little bit of a rhetorical question, but is there a reason why our airport service manager didn't present this?
So I guess that would have been one of the big surprises, right? So our airport services manager has taken another position. And his last day was yesterday, actually. So we are opening the recruitment again, and we hope to very quickly be able to fill that with qualified person. He moved on to the city of Salinas was open.
Okay.
Which is a larger operation.
And then just kind of a comment, my, a little bit personal, but my spouse, as many of you know, is a paratrooper, or is jumps from Army planes. And so he was aware of this exercise, and he was actually scheduled to jump during that exercise. He ended up getting hurt in a parachute accident and didn't run on that one. But a lot of times the Army, when they do these exercises, they don't like the press to know for different operational security reasons. So, you know, you never know. It doesn't hurt to ask, because I agree, it's great. I think it's good press for Marina. But if we get a new airport services manager, it might be nice to have that conversation with them, like, hey, can we, share this? So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to update on police, fire, community facility, potential GO bond.
I think we have Team Civex Charles Heath. So just give you an overview. Charles is going to run through the materials that we have, the mailer, the timeline, our strategy for our public education and outreach for the next couple months, and when the deadlines are that we're going to need to make a decision, and some of the other key outreach that we're going to be doing to the public. We also, after Charles' presentation, we're going to share some of the work that R&T Architects has done as far as different sites that they're looking at. And so we'll kind of update you on that. And then if there's any direction or input from the council on our strategy and different things, we definitely want to receive that at this point. So we'll ready for Charles.
Good evening, Charles. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Okay, well, so my goal tonight is just to give you all an update. We've had a number of different conversations with council over the last few months regarding the plans for a potential revenue measure to upgrade aging city facilities. We've kicked off that outreach effort to make sure that the public is aware of the age of the facilities and the need to replace them, and some of the city's planning that's gone into that. So tonight I'll just summarize sort of where we're at currently in the process, what you can expect over the next few months, and then happy to answer any questions you have. So if we can go to the next slide. As I'm sure you all are aware and probably received at home, in early March, we sent a informational mailing to the roughly 6,700 registered voter households in the city of Marina. The content of that is displayed here, but just generally, the goal was to provide some context to the community regarding the age of some of your key facilities, the public safety facility, obviously, the age of City Hall, and then also some of the opportunity that could exist by upgrading the former Fort Ord aquatics and recreation facilities for the community's benefit. You can see that we featured some pictures that demonstrate the age of the facilities and some of the deficiencies that need to be addressed. And we also included with this a link to a priority survey where people could provide feedback. We're always trying to engage the public and give them opportunities to communicate back to us as well. And if we go to the next slide, we also have posted similar content on the city's website. In fact, more detailed content, including a detailed FAQ on a variety of issues related to this topic. And then we also have that priority survey there where people can give us feedback on their priorities for future facility improvements in the city, and also offer any questions or comments they have related to the proposal in general. And if you go to the next slide, looking at, I didn't want to provide a comprehensive sampling of all the different communication materials that we have, but just to give the council an update, we also have a one-page fact sheet that's available at city facilities. It's also something that we'll be using as a leave behind as we meet with various community groups. And it basically just summarizes the issue and provides, again, links to those opportunities for input. We have that detailed FAQ that we'll be updating on an ongoing basis to address recurring questions that we're hearing from the community. Sort of parallel to the same content that's going out via the mail and available on the city's website, as we have social media content that will be pushing out via the various social media platforms that the city utilizes. And I know at the end of my presentation, I believe Lane will share an informational video that we've created that kind of summarizes the issue in a interactive new media format. Lastly, we have a PowerPoint presentation that we'll use with outreach to opinion leaders and community groups in the community. So if we go to the next slide, now I'll just give you a little bit of a picture of what's going to happen in the coming months. So now as we're entering into April, one of our top priorities is to reach out to key community stakeholder groups. So you can see the listing there of the types of groups that we'll be reaching out to. We certainly invite council members, if you have relationships with these various groups and organizations, to participate in this outreach. In addition to some of the groups in the community, we'll also be reaching out to some of the key opinion leaders as well, to make sure they're aware of the issue. They've had an opportunity to provide input and have their questions answered. In the second half of April, we'll be sending a follow-up direct mail piece that will include a tear-off priority survey, again, giving the community opportunities to provide input. And we will also be utilizing social media to drive traffic to that online survey. We go to the next slide, looking at May, that stakeholder outreach will continue. There's, more groups and organizations that we can reach in a single month. So that will continue into May. And then there'll be a third informational mailer that will summarize some of the feedback that we've received to the community in terms of their priorities and issues that they've raised. And at that point, we expect to have more details around the specifics of the facility plans. And so that will be conveyed to the public as well. Similar content will be distributed via social media and the city website. In May, we will also be working with FM3 Research. That's the polling firm that worked with the city back in 2022 to conduct a baseline survey measuring voter support for a potential bond measure to fund these improvements. Given that a couple of years has passed since that research was conducted, we will want to conduct updated research in the current environment to measure support for the refined proposal that the council will be considering putting on the ballot this November. And if we keep going into June here, again, that stakeholder outreach will continue. This is when we will ask FM3 to conduct that tracking survey of voters. They'll analyze the data. And at your June 18th council meeting, that's when we plan to bring back the results of the survey and some specific recommendations related to the bond amount, the tax rate, the specific projects that would be part of a ballot measure to put before voters. Based on your feedback at that June 18th meeting, we'll then work with your city attorney and city staff to develop the resolution that would come back to you to place the bond measure before voters. And then lastly, in July, we have 2 council meetings targeted on July 2nd and July 16th, which is when we would bring that ballot measure resolution to you for review on the 2nd, and then ultimately for adoption on the 16th. During July, we'll also send a final informational mailing and provide social media and web content that will be distributed that will provide the final details related to the measure that's being put on the ballot for voters to consider, and also information about how to vote in the upcoming election. And the reason we have all that scheduled for July is because August 9th is the deadline to qualify for the November ballot. So we need to have all that work wrapped up. And then once the council votes to place a measure on the ballot, at that point, city resources can no longer be used to communicate about this issue. So at that point, an independent advocacy campaign would need to form to conduct any advocacy efforts to persuade voters to support the measure before Election Day on November 5th. So that's a summary of what I have to share tonight. Happy to answer any questions, or Lane, I don't know if you had other items that you wanted to share with the council as well.
I did want to clarify one thing with the council on that July 16th date. As you recall, we have we're taking that 16th and the August date off for our vacation plans. However, Izunikuni, Japan is going to be visiting us during that period of time, and they want us to hold a special council meeting on the 16th, and they'll make a proclamation. We'll do a proclamation. We'll have a reception, and they want to plant a cherry tree in front of our city hall. And so because we're having to schedule that special meeting for Izunikuni, we thought maybe we could also have this on the 16th. If that doesn't work for the council, we can push it off till the first meeting in August. That just really tightens the time frame, and so that's why we put it on the 16th. So I just want to highlight that kind of messed up our vacation plans a little bit.
Council McCarthy?
Thank you, Mayor. When we spoke about this before, I had expressed some interest in understanding, and this is probably more of a polling question for FM3, but the likelihood of renters versus homeowners voting in a certain way on the bond measure. My limited understanding is there might be a rent control proposition on the November ballot. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but if it is, I'm just wondering if there's any feedback on how that might drive who goes to the polls and how they vote on things like a bond measure. And then second part of the question is, are there any other ballot measures that we're aware of that might drive a certain demographic out to the polls?
Well, what we typically see in presidential general elections is that it's the high water mark of voter turnout. And so because of that, most voters that are eligible and have any sort of track record of voting are going to participate in that election, largely because of the stakes of the national election. So in general elections, down ballot issues, including statewide initiatives and local ballot measures, tend to have only a marginal impact on voter turnout. So now they certainly impact the issue environment and how that influences how people are thinking about issues on that ballot. What we typically see in the sort of renter versus homeowner dynamic, specifically when we're talking about a property tax, which is what a bond measure is fundamentally, is that renters tend to be stronger supporters. That's something we can certainly validate in the upcoming polling that FM3 will be conducting. So, there's a variety, there's, 20 plus statewide initiatives that are currently moving through the process of potentially qualifying for the statewide ballot. I know there's some discussion of some other local measures. So that's one of those things we just have to keep an eye on between now and July when we have to make final decisions about putting the measure forward.
Thank you. That very helpful answers my question. And more of just a comment. I'm just wondering if there's any value in kind of speaking to the renter versus the owner in terms of, because if I was a renter, I too would probably be much more supportive. I mean, is it valuable to present information in a way to different audiences, or is that not allowed? Or
that's typically more of a tactic that's used when you get into the advocacy campaign. So the city's public information efforts need to be broad-based and available to everyone. So we tend to use less targeting in that. But as you get into the advocacy efforts, then certainly there's a strategy to target renters specifically, mobilize renters, make sure they understand that this won't increase their property taxes because they're not property taxpayers directly anyway.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. I forgot to go to public comment. That is our process. So let me open up public comment and ask anyone in this room wish to step forward and comment on this matter.
Thank you, Christina Medina Dirksen, a resident of Marina. This is a long time coming, and I appreciate all the time you all have taken to really not push this through. I'm wondering if, as you move forward and formulate plans, if you're going to have some more solid projections as to what it's going to cost people. Is that going to be part of the communications? And also, what on the back end, whether you're going to be having I saw a blurb, but a committee that will say if it does pass, what is it called? I forgot what it's called. Oversight committee. And the third big elephant in the room is where. I think for people to really put their hands around this big concept, can have a lot of questions. And one big one is, what does the city plan to do it? Where? What's the timeline? And realistically, how it's moving it from theory to concrete, I think is going to have to be something that you all have a good discussion about. So I'm looking forward to supporting this and doing whatever I can to make sure we don't have any more leaky roofs or getting our employees the facilities that they deserve. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in person before we go online? Okay, let's go online. Ask the same of those checking in remotely. Does anyone like to comment on this? Give you a moment. Okay, we'll close public comment and come back to Council Member Vischer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, speaking about renters, they don't pay directly, but of course the homeowner does pay the property tax increase. But we have the city-owned homes at Preston and Abrams. Those people have nothing to lose. They have only to gain. They will not be charged. The owner will not pay doesn't pay property tax. So those, I think we would explain to them, you don't pay, but you will get all these new facilities to use. So we might want to have that message for them. So thank you.
Okay, you bring up Preston and Abrams Park, which are city-owned, and I think that talking about the frequently asked questions, the FAQ sheet, and one elephant in the room is Preston Park and Abrams, because there is the alternative that I think should be discussed, whether we do this bond. In our outreach, we should discuss the alternative of not doing the bond. And the community is already talking about it, so it's not a secret that there is the option to sell Preston Park and Abrams for 100 million to 140 million instead of a bond. And it might be the most transparent thing to do to have two ballot measures. Do you want to sell Preston Park and Abrams? Or do you want to pass this bond and keep Preston and Abrams because of the benefits and pros and cons that are explained in the FAQ, if we want to go down that route? But I think it's also timely because we've owned Preston Park, we've owned Abrams since 1997, I believe, and we've owned all of Preston Park since approximately 2016, something like that. And we're about to have to spend considerable amount of money to renew our loan. So it's in the mix of what should be discussed. We shouldn't be caught flat-footed and not have a prepared, intelligent response when people say, what about this alternative? We can't say, oh, we didn't think about that, or we rejected it out of hand and we can't tell you why. So I guess I'd like to ask our city manager if he thinks it's appropriate to bring Preston Park and Abrams Park into this public discussion.
I think you're absolutely correct. It has been raised in the public, and we've been talking about it on the staff end, and there's a lot of things really to talk with that property. It's an amazing asset for the city, and it has been. We had the same discussion 11 years ago before the city purchased the property, and I think a lot of the same people that are saying sell it now are the same people that were saying back then, you know, don't buy the property. And so you see the value on that end of how much the asset has appreciated over time and the benefits to the city. I've heard quoted numbers of the value of the property per unit, and we would certainly we're talking that with our consultants to get a sense of what that value is per unit. And part of that, the understanding that people don't understand is it has certain binding regulations to that property as far as affordable units. And so those affordable units bring that value down that property a little bit. Because of that, the city also, as we have worked very hard to establish and stabilize our revenue base and to diversify our revenue base, and those are one of the things that has been very important. And those properties contribute $2.5 million a year to the city's general fund, and selling that property would take away that revenue source. And so there's a lot of things that we're talking about internally, and I agree with you. I think we need to put that out for the public discussion. I'd want to hear from Charles, because I would be concerned if you had two ballot measures on the ballot that may affect it to where you might end up killing both ballot measures. But I'd be interested to hear Charles' thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's certainly a a common concern and something we would want to evaluate carefully, because especially if the tax measure either requires a 2/3 vote or a 55% vote, depending on what happens with the ACA 1 measure that's going to be on the statewide ballot. It wouldn't take much for another measure to peel away some support and bring support below that supermajority threshold. So that would be the concern. Oftentimes when sort of competing policy decisions like this are coming forward, the idea would be to put them on the ballot sequentially rather than at the same time, so you avoid that vote splitting. But these are exactly the types of questions we would want to evaluate in polling before we make final decisions about putting anything on the ballot.
Okay, let's go to Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I know the issue of selling Preston Park isn't on the agenda, so I want to be careful not to go too into my opinions on there, other than to say I'm not so sure I would be in favor of even having the discussion anytime soon. What I would be interested in is having staff maybe put together a little bit more information about the pros and cons, maybe reach out to the person that I know reached out to all of us, get some information from them on why they think that might be such a beneficial agreement for the city. I just imagine, had we sold that land 15 years ago, I mean, I would think all of us would be looking back and say that would have been the biggest mistake we could have ever made. I would think in 15 years that we would probably be in the same boat. So yeah, again, I don't want to go too into the discussion because it's not on our agenda, but I would worry about even having that discussion before we take this bond to the public.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Biala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question. How many misplaced residents that are currently in the affordable units in Preston and Abrams would occur if we sold it? What's the number of people living in Abrams and Preston Park?
Sorry, are you referring to those that are in the affordable units? Those are restrictions that can't go away. And so if we sold it, those would still have to remain to be affordable units.
Okay, and then the other people who could be displaced? How many people are we talking about?
Matt, so we have 192 units at Abrams Park, 354 at Preston's Park. I'm not, don't recall that the total number of affordable units that we will have that we're required to build out a Sea Haven.
Build out a Sea Haven is supposed to be 182. So I think you're right. It's on the deed restrictions, so those will always be affordable.
Okay, but we're talking about the possibility of Abrams and Preston Park only, not Sea Haven.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So the two are kind of tied together with the development. So
Mm.
Abrams Park is providing affordable units for Sea Haven. So as Sea Haven
Yeah.
grows,
Okay,
the
got it.
affordable. units
Yeah,
grow.
right. Okay. But in terms of the number of people that could potentially be impacted is roughly what, 400, 500 people?
Well, there's 548 units. So if you figured probably an average of
Two.
three people per unit,
Okay.
probably minus affordable. Yeah, I'm not sure anybody would be displaced or, I don't know. If somebody
Okay.
bought the property, I don't know that they would displace.
Yeah, we don't, and yeah, we don't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, we absolutely just don't know
We
that.
could say about 350 homes, we don't know how many people are in them. Their rent could be increased substantially if they're not in the affordable deeded homes.
Right, right. And I think that I kind of agree with Councilmember McCarthy is that I'm not sure that this is the way to sell a bond measure is by offering a solution in which a large portion of people will be impacted. I don't know that that's appropriate. I mean, we have our own reasons for suggesting the bond measure, but it's going to create some real pain, I think, for people living there to think that this is something we're considering. And that is a long-term strategy, if anything. And there's so much unknowns about selling our property that we've owned for how many decades, I don't think that we need to talk about that. And it would really upset a large portion of our community, as well as going against our values of having affordable units in our community. So I have concerns about that too. Another question, June 18th is when we're going to get the survey results. So if the results say that, we're on the border, or we are running a bigger risk, depending on, and I guess you'll have to show the results weighed against 2/3 majority passage or the 50+1, and then we'll have to make a decision. But we could potentially kill the bond measure if the survey isn't supportive of this. Is that the date that we would know we're either going to go forward or not?
Well, ultimately, you have until August 9th to make a final decision about placing the measure on the ballot. So that would be the last point at which you could make a go or no go decision. Practically
Okay.
speaking, I expect on June 18th, we'll have enough data to make that decision. And we'll be looking
Okay.
for direction from the council as to, the specifics to bring back in a resolution.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. Councilmember McAdams?
Thank you, Mayor. I think with regards to the outreach, I am wondering, are we offering in other languages or Spanish at least?
Currently, the materials have only been produced in English, but we can certainly have them translated.
Great. I would love to see language accessible options. I mean, maybe not just necessarily printed, but if a QR code can take the user to be able to select the language of their choosing, I think that would be helpful. For me, I want to sort of think beyond just the ballot measure. And a question that I had sent the city manager over the weekend was, is there a congruent deferred maintenance plan for the aging facilities and infrastructure? And if so, can you send? And the answer I received was no. There is no deferred maintenance plan for the aging facilities. Our public works director and building official have estimated the deferred maintenance between 10 to 15 million. So for me, as time goes on, the 10 to 15 million is going to be 20 million, 25, 30 million, and on and on and on. So I would encourage this council, yes, let's continue to go down this path of perhaps, putting a measure on the ballot. And what's another plan? And so maybe part of that plan, and this is completely conceptual. I mean, perhaps obviously, hopefully maybe this is something that could be agendized later, but maybe we take some of the rental revenues put them in a separate pot and start, addressing whatever projects. I do think that that would be, just smart and insightful of us because we are seeing this problem and we're trying to address it. And I would hope that there's maybe more than one solution to try, like that whole, like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So perhaps a future conversation for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. So we heard from Christina during public comment that she thinks the cost projections to the taxpayer, of course, need to be disclosed. She may have also been talking about cost of the facilities. Now, what are the elements that are going to be purchased with the bond money, such as fire station? How much money does that cost? Community center, how much money, et cetera. So cost for the facilities, and then language in the frequently asked question page about how the oversight committee will exist and maybe a little bit about how it forms. So I think those are good and probably already contemplated by our consultants and staff to be in the FAQ. Logistical matter is that Kathy Biala and I are on a subcommittee to review these outreach materials, and May, like every month, there's things going on in regards to outreach material, and Kathy and I will be out of town approximately the 8th of May to the 16th. So early May and late May, we can participate, but probably not the 8th to the 16th. And I wanted to ask the consultant, because you mentioned a potential ballot measure that would reduce the threshold to 55%, isn't there also another ballot measure that would increase or keep it at 67%? Aren't there dueling ballot measures on that threshold for this November?
So it's a complicated question to answer because there's actually 3 potential statewide initiatives that all deal with the same subject matter. ACA 1 is the one that would basically make bond and special taxes that are for infrastructure purposes, and the types of city facilities that you're discussing would qualify as infrastructure projects, would reduce the threshold from 2/3 to 55%. There is a separate citizens initiative that's being put forth by a group called the Business Roundtable that would make some fundamental changes to how taxes can be enacted in California. That would not specifically apply to the type of measure we're talking about here. That pertains more to special taxes that qualify for the ballot through the citizens initiative process. And then there's a third statewide initiative called ACA 13 that would basically require that Business Roundtable initiative to reach the same 2/3 threshold that it is proposing for citizens initiative special taxes. So I know that's a complicated answer, but the most simple explanation I can give is that if ACA 1 is approved, regardless of what happens with those other measures, it would lower the threshold for this type of measure that we're talking about to 55%.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that because of ACA 1, the 55% reduced threshold would apply to our bonds anticipated amenities. And it didn't seem to me that a community center, civic center would be. So on your slide presentation, you have a couple of slides that talk about that. And if you go to those 2 slides, the second one starts out saying public infrastructure defined as sewer, parks, open space, public safety buildings, but it doesn't mention community center, civic center.
Yes, no, you're correct. The administrative city hall facilities, and it's actually the last slide that's in the slide deck there, is the one piece that is not part of the ACA 1 legislation.
Okay,
So
where is
in
that?
scenario?
On the
In order to
last,
qualify for 55%, we would have to find another funding source for that specific part of the project.
okay, so this is critical if we're thinking happily about a 55% threshold, because it's my understanding that that element of community center could cost $35 million. So that's the biggest piece of all of this. And so if we had a bond that passed at 55%, but not 66.7, then we couldn't use those monies for the community center, civic center. Is that correct?
I believe the community center piece would fit under the Parks and Recreation category within ACA 1. It's really the administrative city hall type facilities that
Okay.
wouldn't currently qualify.
Okay, so if you have a modern community center that's for the community and it has some offices in it where staff work, would those staff offices be fundable by the bond measure?
I think that's fundamentally a legal question that we would have to investigate.
Okay. All right. Let's go to Councilmember Biala.
Yes, along those lines also, and this is something that we were thinking about anyway, because we weren't thinking that we should have an elaborate chamber, a city council chamber, that if we did a true community center, we could have a room that is also used for general community activities, but also maybe a movable dais so that you could pull it back and put a partition or close it off somehow. And then you'd have a big, gigantic, beautiful room for other community things. Would that be acceptable too? We'd be multi-purposing a room so that we would be having our civic hall as part of our community rooms.
I think there's likely a way to make that work. Again, we're talking about an initiative that's been put forward that isn't law yet. And whenever these initiatives pass, there's some litigation and other work that has to be done to clarify some of these nuanced interpretations. And so it's hard to say today exactly where that line would draw in terms of allowable facilities and facilities that aren't allowable under ACA 1. But I think if you were building something that qualified as a facility that had recreational purposes that also happened to have civic purposes, I think there's probably a rationale there that makes that work.
Great. And also I would like to sort of introduce this idea and see what you think about also talking about repairs and repairs of current facilities. If the bond measure did not pass, what kind of money would we have to waste just to get it to be ADA compliant or safe or livable and workable spaces now? Because we don't have that now. It's pretty appalling. So is that something that we can quantify, and does that impact the way in which somebody would think about, do we invest in new facilities or do we waste $20 million trying to get it the substandard unit up to par, to minimum standards?
I think
And
it
how much
certainly
that
does
would cost.
influence how voters think about an issue like this. I'd have to defer to the city manager how we quantify what those costs might approximate.
That definitely is a FAQ that we can develop. We've been talking about that anyway. But it's more than just repairing the facilities. They aren't large enough to support the existing needs of the community. And so even if you repaired it, you still are not meeting the needs of the community, and we're continuing to grow. And so that was part of our discussions years ago when we talked about it, would be investing $10 to $15 million just to address the deferred maintenance needs, but it doesn't address all the new ADA code requirements and the additional places that we're going to have to add on additional parking. And so there's a little bit more than just repair.
But to somehow quantify that a little bit more so we know what the alternative is if we don't pass this bond measure. That's my point.
Yes.
Thank you.
On that.
Okay. Councilmember Vischer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that was also my question. Can we get an updated number for the $10 to $15 million? Because that might be outdated by now. And also, if the bond measure passes and if we get a new civic center, how much can the current facilities be sold for? because that then can help to pay off the bond faster, I hope. So that might be good to explain to the voters. Thank you.
All right. I think our outreach has to be ambitious in its comprehensiveness. Councilmember Vischer just mentioned basically the concept, what do we do with this room we're sitting in and all of the facilities around City Hall now if a bond passes and we want to move everything to the library? How much money does that bring in? What can we do with it? I think if we don't have these kinds of questions answered in the FAQ and the outreach, then there are so many reasons to say no to taking more money out of my wallet to help the city that everything we don't disclose is going to be a reason why some people vote against this. We have to explain why it's a good idea from every angle. And if we stick our head in the sand and don't address certain angles, then those people will just think that we were premature in asking them for more money. And on the money angle, the FAQ and the outreach at some point, probably latter in latter development, not early. We're still early now, but the third mailer, I don't know which mailer, but in the future, I think we have to get real about the costs. We've been talking about a $53 million bond, but we've also listed over $80 million of need for amenities. And we know from experience that we always underestimate. So if we say 53 million, we're really probably talking 75 million. And if we say 83 million, we're really probably talking over 100 million. And so I think that the education needs to be realistic in the outreach, what a $53 million bond would buy and what it wouldn't buy. Because if people see that we were going to spend 53 million, let's say $350 out of my pocket every year for the next 30 years, whoever owns my home, but it doesn't get us an aquatic center. And to do that, we need another bond. We just have to be comprehensive, I think, in our outreach. And we have to think about it after talking to all the residents that we can. We have to think about it from every angle and every perspective and make sure that those perspectives are addressed in our outreach in such a way that we can say, we have addressed this. You have a good point. Here's our response. Please vote yes on the bond, or whatever we might be telling them. I don't think we're anywhere close to that. And I think it's going to take a lot of work to get there. But when I talk to people in the community, I don't see any groups that would be willing to go to bat for this initiative yet. And without any groups, we're on our own. And that's why I think we need to be transparent about what our options are, because it's easy for the public to learn from one another that there's this big alternative out there that we're not discussing called selling Preston Park. So if we as a dais decide to not address it and let it just go into the streets, I think it's not our best strategy. Okay, other questions? Councilmember Riala?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I also am concerned that the knee-jerk reaction, if you may, of selling off our properties is one in which we can't predict what the new buyers will build on those properties. We quickly lose the control of the future of our city because it's no longer, we can no longer call the shots on it. So I understand from a money wise, it's easy money to sell off, but I think that there are other things, not only about promoting affordable units and also about diversity, equity, inclusion, and also about control for Marina's long-term future. So I hope if we're going to talk about that, that we look at it and educate people about some of the things we're going to lose if we think like that. This isn't just a matter of looking at what else can we sell of our properties in order to build something new. It's my only comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I agree that knee jerk is not where we want to go, but that's where we will be if we don't have an intelligent discussion about this alternative. You're going to tell resident X one thing, I'm going to tell them something else. And the city is not telling them something through the FAQ and the education outreach, then they're going to be thinking that we're knee jerk going for a bond without fully exploring the options that other people are talking about, and we're not. Let's go, Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. So while I appreciate that, I think we should be aware of, possible funding alternatives. I think those alternatives are many. I've only heard this idea of selling Preston Park from one person. Frankly, I've heard a lot of ideas of how the city can generate revenue aside from a bond measure. They all have some validity. But I'm just not worried about this idea that this is some big thing that the public is going to rally against. And if they do, I think it's incumbent upon groups that are passionate about that to kind of generate some of that, and then maybe we can have this discussion again if that happens. But again, I think there's just all kinds of different ideas of how we can generate revenue, right? We could build our own desal and sell water to Pacific Grove. I hear they have lots of money and their rates are high. So, but seriously, right? Like selling Preston Park is one idea, but I can think of others. Selling our parks, right? And building parks somewhere else, or I just don't give it a lot of credibility, frankly. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Mayor.
Let's go to Councilmember McAdams.
Thank you. And I agree with the mayor wholeheartedly, to be prepared to have all the information when a question is posed to say, oh yeah, we did explore that and this is what we found. And so, I do think that there's a lot of value and importance, especially, with what the mayor said, like right now, I don't know if we're really selling it, and so we have to be prepared in that capacity to where we are able to communicate, yes, we've exhausted all the resources and we've looked down every path and avenue, and this is really, the direction that the city needs to go, because somebody's vote, for me, it is so sacred, and really, they're entrusting so much in, that elected official or that ballot measure or the city, whatever. And so, I do think that it is our duty to make sure that the information we're providing is robust and transparent. So I appreciate the mayor's comment on that.
Thank you. Let's go back to Councilmember Biala. Okay. So staff, what more would you like from us, if anything? And Charles?
We did want to run through this little presentation we had on city facilities. And actually, before we do that, while Charles is here, can we run that social media video?
City in 1975, the population was approximately 10,000. The current population exceeds 23,000, and yet the city still relies on the fire stations, police station, and city facilities that were built for
Great audio, but the video could improve.
Video's lagging.
But the audio is great. If we could hear that, even just with the audio, that would be great. We can be wowed by the video another time. This is a good radio commercial, right? Doesn't have to be TV. Oh, whose voice is that?
Charles, whose voice is that?
That is a professional voiceover person. Not mine.
You have a fine radio voice, Charles.
Thank you.
We could save money and have you do the next one.
I've been told I have a radio face too.
You also have a sportscaster face.
population exceeds 23,000, and yet the city still relies on the fire stations, police station, and city facilities that were built for a much smaller city. Over the last 8 years, 911 calls to the Marina Fire Department have increased by more than 50%, and approximately 80% of those calls were for medical emergencies requiring the quick response of an EMT responding from a local fire station. Because Marina's aging fire stations were built for a much smaller population, they are not located near to where many Marina residents live, resulting in average response times of 8 to 10 minutes, while the national standard for rapid emergency response is 5 minutes or less. Emergency planning, operations, disaster preparedness, law enforcement, and other vital services occur in outdated and aging facilities. The temporary portable buildings are meant to be used for 25 to 30 years, but the city has been operating in them for almost 50 years. In the event of a critical incident, such as a major earthquake, many facilities may not remain operational. To upgrade and improve local facilities and protect the safety of Marina residents, the city has developed plans for safe and modern facilities to ensure firefighters, EMTs, and police officers can respond quickly in a disaster or emergency. Improve 911 emergency response times to medical emergencies, fires, and accidents. Provide seismically safe facilities for emergency operations, disaster preparedness, and other city operations. Provide a community center and sports and aquatic center for children, teens, families, and seniors to safely access city programs and services. The cost to upgrade Marina's aging facilities is beyond what the city's current budget can support. The City Council is considering placing a local funding measure on the ballot for local voters to consider. As the city plans for a safer marina, please visit cityofmarina.org for more information or to provide feedback.
Great video. Fantastic video. One public group, and we really want all public groups to get behind this. One public group is sports field advocates, and parks and recreation are part of that 55% threshold should that ACA 1 ballot measure pass. And so I'm wondering if the FAQ and the outreach can somehow show flexibility that should the residents want some of this bond money to go to ball fields, it could go to ball fields. I don't want to promise, without being able to deliver. But that's my question is, as we go through this process and we hear back from the public what they want the bond money to go to before August, do we have the chance to inform them that it could go to those places they are asking it to go to?
Charles, do you want to answer that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the proposal can be fine-tuned up until the council votes to put it on the ballot. So if we hear either through community feedback or through the upcoming polling that, those are higher voter priorities, we would just need to know sort of the scope of different options that you would want to test in the poll. And then we can certainly write a measure that's responsive to those priorities. Obviously, there's a financial component of that too, and you can't do everything. So we'd have to make some decisions about where we would prioritize the dollars.
Thank you. Others? Councilmember McCarthy?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious, we kind of joked about the voice, but have you done any studies about how that kind of voice resonates with a community like ours? I mean, being male, being presumably not necessarily of an alternate sounded like a white male to me. Just curious if you've looked into that at all.
Yeah, I mean, over the course of a communications program, we'll usually use a variety of different voices to sort of neutralize some of those issues and biases. But depending on the issue, yeah, sometimes we'll choose a female voice and try to have as neutral an accent as possible.
Okay, and that's based off of what generates the most interest or votes for the bond measure?
It's hard to directly correlate back to issues like voice, but yeah, it's more just based on experience and feedback we receive.
Okay. And then just to follow up on the conversation about selling assets, I'm wondering when staff does come back to us with some information, would this be something that could be the subject of price and terms, closed session, selling a property like that?
I think once there was more sort of definite, like we're gonna consider selling these properties, right? Then we could have a discussion in closed session, but I don't think we can get there.
So just in terms of even, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if it's gonna be just a general discussion, like what we think the value of these properties are, I mean, that's something that can be discussed here in
Okay.
open session.
All right, thank you. Okay, so staff and Charles, have you gotten what you want?
Oh, one more quick thing. So tee up the facility discussion. Okay, next slide, please. So when we talk facilities, we're really talking about police station. It's a public safety station that was designed for a public safety department does not meet the needs today. We're talking a separate fire station. The existing fire station will stay in the existing building on the short term to continue to provide services for this part of the city. A second fire station will be built, which is primarily due to growth demands. And we're talking a sports and aquatic center that we've saved close to $20 million. We're still about $15 to $20 million short on that. And then when we talk about community center, we're talking about a senior center that we have $1 million already from the state. We're talking about community rooms, community facilities. We're talking about council chambers that are community facilities. And then we're talking about city offices. Now our architects, and it's R&T Architects, they've been out on site a couple times. They've been looking at different sites, and what they're looking at is for ownership and availability. And we have 5 different sites, and we'll show those in just a second. They're looking at the zoning, the current use, the issues of topography, really how can you develop that, the cost of that, parking. They've already met with all of our departments, all of our staff, and they have a good sense of our workspace needs today and in the future, and some specific problems that we have that need to be met. We've talked about adjacency needs, and then they're looking at these properties. They're looking at just functionally, are they suitable? Really, what are the objectives as we're looking for properties? Because even if they're functionally there, they may not necessarily meet the objectives you want. So next slide.
What is site response?
Oh, and site responses is just at a specific site, does it really respond to the needs of the city and of the community? We kind of already covered that. So next slide. So these are the 5 primary locations we're looking at right now. One is the Lock Padden Park location. And as we've talked about in the past, that's indicated as one of the sites in our general plan that the community approved. We've talked with the Marina Coastal Water District, at least with one of their board members, and they think that's compatible with their existing master plan. If we move forward with that site, there's a lot more discussions that have to go with the not the Marina Coastal Water District, sorry, the Monterey Peninsula Regional Park District. But there are definitely constraints with this property. But so this kind of shows you one location that our architects are looking at. They'll be laying out facilities, parking, see how that all fits in the different uses. Next slide. We're looking at the MST site on reservation, and you see the existing transit center. And we've talked with MST, and we know that they're going to be going out to RFP for this site again. And their primary objectives in this site is they want things that are going to be compatible with transit, and they're going to be encouraging future growth and use of transit. And so we talked with them about if we bought it for a park, they'd be interested. And they said, no, they would not sell it to us for a park. We talked about if we did community facilities here, community center, police, fire facilities. They said, yes, that absolutely it fits within their goals and that would support what they want to do. And so on a high level, again, this wasn't taking their board or anything, but just on a high level conceptually, they said this is possibly a site to consider. And so our consultants are working on all the things associated with that site. And next slide, please. Our existing Vince DiMaggio building, and we're looking at kind of the lower park. We looked at this site before. We were looking at a senior center location. Obviously, we have constraints with that site, and this gets one more of the council objectives, where we want to use up some potential the lower park there for city facilities, but that is a site that we are currently looking at, and long term, our fire study really identified this potentially as a location for our future fire station when the fire station here goes away. And so they're exploring that site. Next slide. Our existing Hillcrest site, and so they're really fleshing that out and all the different constraints with that, and so we definitely are seeing if it's feasible, and we'll have some good discussions with that. We know that eventually in the future we will be losing our parking for our police. I've talked with the potential person that's going to be buying the property down there, and for them to develop their property, they will need that parking space, and so we know that long term that space will go away, and that's factored into all the decisions of parking and accessibility. And then our last site that we're looking at is Cypress Knolls, and we're looking at this just from a perspective of potential. This is the location for our fire facility, but we're also looking at doing some adjacencies, and maybe you want to look at the police facility attached with that. Also, potentially, do you want to look at our courtyard facility down there? And so that's a location that we're also exploring. We aren't necessarily looking at that for putting a community center type facility down there, but police and fire. And so those are the 5 sites that our architects are looking at, and in a couple of weeks they'll come back with a more robust discussion and analysis, and they'll be walking through those different criteria and give you some feedback on that. Next slide. What they have put together so far is a rough estimate of space that would need. Again, this is based on discussions with all the departments of their current and their future needs. And so our community center and council chambers is about 25,000 square feet. Police facilities 18,000, and fire is 20,000. Just on a high level, the architects, and they feel very comfortable that $800 a square foot, you would be able to build all the facilities, and that's a conservative number for them. And so when you add that up, that's close to roughly $50 million that it would take to build and develop all that. So we're working on those numbers. And next slide. Yeah, $800 a square foot. And to put that in reference, when they build the residential units out here, they're building roughly $180 a square foot is the cost of the new residential homes. And so there, we think that number would probably come below 800, but they're putting that out there as a conservative number to look at. And then this just gives you a little bit more of the breakdown when they is they're coming up with this $25,000 or 25,000 square foot number. And again, this is just very high level, but this is based on the initial discussions with the staff. And next slide kind of goes through the police department and those different type uses that would be in that. And then the next slide is our fire facility also. And so that just gives you an overview of the locations. If you have other thoughts on locations that we aren't considering or other things that you want the architects to look at, please let us know. Or we're going to target our April 16th meeting to come back and have a more robust discussion on these locations, because we know that we're going to try to need to get that pinned down more as we go out to the public. A question that be interested in Charles' feedback is, if we haven't fully decided on a firm location, but we have a couple options and alternatives, how does that play out and putting a measure on the ballot? Or do you really need to have a firm location identified before you put something on the ballot?
Yeah, I think the voters are going to expect that we have firm information on the location and cost estimates before they're going to be comfortable voting on it. That's a pretty critical piece of information.
And did you have aquatic center estimate? Aquatic
Yes.
sports center?
Yeah, so we estimate between 15 and 20 million to complete those facilities.
Okay, so for the community center, the fire, the police, and the aquatic sports center, I get something like 72 million or something like that.
Correct. I think that's correct.
And in the ballpark, we were thinking $53 million bond, right? So a $53 million bond, you mentioned, in addition to the 20 million we already have in hand for the aquatic sports center. So that $53 million bond and that 20 million we have in hand would be about 75 million to buy a police station, fire station, community center, aquatic sports center.
So we have 20 million in hand. We need another 15 to 20 million for the aquatic and sports center.
Okay. So those kinds of figures will be in our next April 16th look.
Correct. I can give you a high level as we've been working with Kaiser Marston. A $50 million bond. The average homeowner, the average assessed value in Marina would be about $22 a month. The impact in that's very similar to what we had talked about a couple of years ago.
$325, something like that.
Correct. And at 75 million, I believe that's like about $32 or $33 a month, just to give you a high level right now. But I think it'll be in those ranges.
That's about $380 a month. So about $325 and $380 a month, something like that.
Yeah,
Mr. Mayor, it's 10 o'clock. past
Okay,
noon.
all motion, we go to the end of this item. Okay, any comment before we vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, I think we're almost done. Any other comments? Let's go to Councilmember Biala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that in some places where they do charrettes, they have sort of buildings like three-dimensional kind of skeleton places, because on this map, it would be really nice to see, like, and I know you don't want to commit to it, but at least some idea for the public and us to see, like, what part are they contemplating? If we can sort of have, even if you use the same, sort of stick figure kind of outlines of buildings, that it would be helpful for us to envision what kind of configuration we're looking at. Is that possible, Charles?
Well, That's from the architects and they're absolutely working on that right now.
Oh, great,
So
great.
you will definitely have that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilmember Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to comment, I'm very glad to see that other locations are seriously being considered. So that because this is going to be for the next decades, and we really need to make sure that we have looked at all the options. And I'm very happy to see several locations downtown that might be very good for this. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And I talked to MST staff about the city buying that parcel back that they paid federal money for next to their transit, because they bought 3.3 acres for, I think it was 3 million. They had a $3 million grant, I believe, from the federal government, and they used some of it for their current transit center. So it wouldn't be all of that 3 million that they'd have to pay back if they used it for a non-transit. So, but anyway, I asked them about a park, and the answer I got was it's something that's in the realm of possibility. Should we want a park there? So I'm glad that we're thinking about it as a community center. And I think in that discussion, we should also be thinking about it, if not a community center, because somewhere else is better, that we don't have a park downtown. And that could be like our Paso Robles Park, right? Any great city has a great central park, and we don't. So that's like an ideal place. And Elizabeth mentioned another ideal place is between Starbucks and CVS, or Starbucks and Walgreens, I'm sorry. So I don't know how we make sure that we talk about all these things, but they're all interconnected. And I think the more we can show people pictures, like someone was just suggesting, Kathy was suggesting 3D buildings, the more people get excited because the more real it is. But if you just talk in the air about ideas, their eyes gloss over, and it's not very, they don't want to spend money on ideas, but when they see what they might get, that starts to get them to salivate a little bit. Yeah, and we did say we'd go to the end of this meeting, so that issue. So I guess we're ready to adjourn because we're going to skip the housekeeping because the motion was to the end of that last issue, and we're there now. Okay, so thank you. Great meeting, everybody. Jeff Perrine is still with us.
Yeah.
He did go out and had a beer real quick. Did you notice that? A celebratory. I'm just kidding. We don't know where he went. Jeff, thanks for being here representing 23,000. So we are adjourned. Call. So anyway, it's going to be out there. Oh yeah, right. And they'll do an RFP and they won't get anything out of it. It'll be another, because it's complicated. It has to be mixed use. No one wants to do mixed use.